There is a small town tucked somewhere in the forests of Oregon where the trees grow too close together. The shadows move when nothing is there to cast them. And a handmade sign at the edge of the county line reads, "Welcome to Gravity Falls." And from the very first frame of the very first episode, you already know that this place is not what it seems. So get comfortable. Pull something warm around you. We are going deep tonight. Section 1. The Town That Should Not Exist. Why is Gravity Falls so strange? Before we can talk about individual mysteries, we have to sit with the biggest one of all. The one that every other question in the show grows out of, like roots from a single strange seed. Why is Gravity Falls the way it is? What makes this one specific patch of Oregon a magnet for every weird, impossible, terrifying, and beautiful thing that has ever crawled out of the margins of the known world? It sounds like a simple question. It is not. When Dipper and Mabel Pines arrive in the summer of 2012 to spend the season with their great-uncle Stan, they are 12 years old, wide-eyed, and completely unprepared for a town where gnomes stack themselves into human shapes to propose marriage, where a shape-changing creature born from an alien egg lurks beneath the forest floor, where the journals of a paranoid genius describe over 100 cataloged anomalies that no rational explanation can account for. Within days, Dipper has a journal in his hands and a birthmark on his forehead that looks exactly like the Big Dipper, and you start to wonder if his arrival here was ever really an accident. The town of Gravity Falls is located in what the show describes as being north of normal and west of weird, somewhere in Oregon's forested interior. Real-world coordinates, hidden in promotional materials, place the town near the area around 44.7935331 degrees north, 121.556397 degrees west, which would put it somewhere in central Oregon, not far from the Cascades. The show's creator, Alex Hirsch, has said that the overall feel of the setting was inspired by the cheesy roadside attractions of rural Oregon, including an actual town called Boring, Oregon, which is exactly as wonderfully mundane as it sounds. But the strangeness of Gravity Falls goes far beyond quirky roadside stops. This town is a genuine supernatural epicenter, and the show never fully explains why. What we do know comes pieced together from the journals, from cave paintings described by Stanford Pines, and from the fractured memories of a man who spent 30 years wandering through other dimensions, trying to make sense of it. The ancient peoples who once lived near the valley that would become Gravity Falls clearly knew something was wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it. They left cave paintings, they documented encounters with Bill Cipher, they figured out a prophecy for defeating him, and then they left. Around the year 1000 AD, the inhabitants simply abandoned the valley and declared it cursed land. They walked away from it. That tells you everything you need to know about the kind of place this was long before any tourist trap or mystery shack was ever built. Stanford Pines came to Gravity Falls in the early 1980s because his research pointed to the town as the most concentrated point of anomalous supernatural activity in the entire United States. He had an enormous grant from his graduate work and a mind that could not stop asking questions. And the town of Gravity Falls was the biggest question mark he had ever found. 6 years of research filled 3 journals. Over 100 cataloged creatures. Gnomes, merpeople, time anomalies, golem constructions, invisible wizards, gremloblin sightings, unicorns that were not remotely as benevolent as stories suggested, a ghost tied to a family curse that stretched back over a century and a half. Ford documented all of it with meticulous precision and increasing dread. The Gravity Falls wiki notes that it was later revealed in the episode A Tale of Two Stands that most of the supernatural anomalies in Gravity Falls actually originated from other dimensions. The town sits at a dimensional weak point, a place where the fabric separating our reality from the nightmare realm and countless other dimensions is thin enough that things bleed through. Ford's research eventually suggested that the anomalies were not random, but connected, all pointing toward the same convergence, all building toward the same event. An event that would eventually become known as Weird McGucket. But here is a mystery that the show never resolves. Not really. Why that valley? Why that specific stretch of Oregon forest? Ford's research told him it was an anomaly cluster, but he never found the root cause. Even after 30 years of extra-dimensional wandering and decades of additional study, the underlying reason for Gravity Falls' unique position as a supernatural crossroads remained unclear. Was it a geographical accident, some quirk of ley lines, or magnetic resonance beneath the Earth? Was it a side effect of ancient dealings with Bill Cipher that warped the land itself? Was there something in the ground, something the alien craft buried beneath the town might have left behind? These are questions the show poses and then, with characteristic restraint, does not fully answer. What makes Gravity Falls compelling as a setting rather than just a backdrop is that the town itself behaves almost like a character. It responds to the people in it. It draws certain individuals toward it, specifically brilliant, curious, slightly obsessive people who cannot stop pulling at threads. Ford was drawn here. Gideon Gleeful somehow fell into its orbit. Dipper Pines, with his birthmark that mirrors a constellation, that itself serves as a navigational tool for thousands of years of human history, arrives and immediately finds a journal that was hidden in the forest as if waiting for him. The town tests people. It rewards the ones who are brave enough to look directly at the strange and ask why. Now for the first batch of mysteries, and we are going to go through a lot of ground tonight, so settle in. Mystery number 1. Why was the valley abandoned around 1000 AD? The show gives us the general answer that the ancient inhabitants encountered Bill Cipher, figured out how to defeat him using the Zodiac, and then decided the land was too cursed to stay. But the specific circumstances of their departure are never shown. Were they driven out? Did they leave voluntarily? Did Bill somehow accelerate their exodus? We know they left detailed cave paintings behind as warnings. That level of effort suggests they wanted whoever came next to know the truth. But why not just destroy the summoning incantation? Why leave instructions that could summon Bill rather than destroying them? That choice to document and warn, rather than simply erase, cost Ford dearly thousands of years later. Mystery number 2. The floating cliffs. These formations appear multiple times in the show, visible in the background near the forest. Ford's notes in the journals, specifically on the cliffs page in Journal 1, as seen in the episode Not What He Seems, contain a decoded cipher that reads, "My compass goes haywire the closer I get to them." Does this mean what I think it does? The answer may be underground. The cliffs clearly interfere with magnetic instrumentation, which suggests an enormous magnetic or gravitational anomaly buried beneath them. Ford suspected the answer was underground. Given what we later learn about the UFO buried beneath the town, this starts to make a certain horrifying amount of sense, but it is never confirmed. Those cliffs remain unexplained. Mystery number 3. The number 618. It appears everywhere in Gravity Falls, on stamps, on signs, on tickets, woven into scenes in ways that feel like they are communicating something. It is, as fans eventually confirmed, the birthday of creator Alex Hirsch himself, born on June 18th. He and his twin sister Ariel are the real-world inspirations for Dipper and Mabel. So, in one sense, the number is a signature, a creator hiding himself in his own work. But the show weaves the number so deeply into its fabric, in such deliberate and sometimes unsettling places, that it has taken on a life beyond the simple Easter egg. It appears in episodes that have nothing to do with birthdays. It shows up in places that feel like coordinates, like markers, like it is pointing towards something just outside the frame. Mystery number 4, the coordinates. Embedded in early promotional materials for the show were real-world coordinates. 44.793531 degrees north, 121.556397 degrees west. They mark a real location in Oregon. Alex Hirsch has never fully explained the significance of this exact location. It is not boring Oregon, the stated inspiration. It is a forested area that, if you visited today, would look unremarkable. But the deliberate precision of those coordinates, hidden in promotional text in a way that required you to highlight invisible text to see them, suggests they were meant to be found. And yet nobody has ever definitively explained what you were supposed to find there, or whether finding the location was the point or just the beginning. Mystery number 5. Why do certain people seem to be drawn to Gravity Falls across generations? Quentin Tremblay found it. The Northwest family built their dynasty on it. Stanford Pines was pulled toward it by research and obsession. Gideon Gleeful arrived with powers he should not have had. Even Blendon Blandon, a time traveler from the far future, kept returning to this town across multiple timelines, despite having every reason to avoid it. The show implies that Gravity Falls functions almost like a gravitational lens for the strange and the gifted, pulling them in. But the mechanism for this attraction is never explained. Is it Bill Cipher nudging people across centuries into position? Is it the town itself, some property of the dimensional weak point that creates a kind of spiritual magnetism? Is it the prophecy of the zodiac arranging its 10 symbols across time? Mystery number 6. The gravity of the town. Pay attention to the opening theme. There is a moment where Dipper and Mabel and the objects around them begin to float, as though gravity itself has briefly been suspended. It is a visual gag, obviously a pun on the show's title, but the show takes pains to establish that Gravity Falls is a real place with real physics that sometimes goes wrong, especially near dimensional weak points. Ford's research notes that his compass behaves erratically near the floating cliffs. During Weird McGucket, the laws of physics in the town break down dramatically. The title of the show is not just a name. It is a description of what happens there. Gravity falls. The normal rules stop applying. And nobody has ever given us a complete, satisfying explanation for why. Mystery number 7. The underground UFO. Buried beneath the town is a crashed alien spacecraft of enormous size discovered by Stanford Pines in the episode Dipper and Mabel versus the Future. The craft contains advanced technology, including a vast supply of dwarvish titanium that Ford uses to reinforce the barrier protecting the town during Weird McGucket. The cryptogram in the ship's cargo bay, when decoded, reads, "Specimen has escaped, is changing forms." This links the ship directly to the shapeshifter, also known as Experiment 210. But the ship itself raises more questions than the shapeshifter does. Who built it? Where was it coming from? Why did it crash specifically in Gravity Falls? Was the ship drawn here by the same dimensional anomalies that attracted everything else? Or did it crash here by accident and contribute to the anomalies by doing so? We know the ship has been there for an extremely long time, which means its presence predates Ford, predates the Northwest family, predates even the native peoples who eventually fled the valley. Mystery number 8. Why does Stan's fez hat bear the crescent symbol on the Bill Cipher zodiac? The show eventually confirms that Stan is one of the 10 figures on the zodiac, his symbol being the crescent. But Stan never studied the zodiac, never knew about it until the series was nearly over. His fez is one he simply started wearing as part of the Mystery Shack's look, an old prop he found. So why does it bear the crescent symbol? Was it always going to be Stan's symbol? Was the symbol placed on that specific hat by some design of fate or Bill's machinations? Was there something special about the fez before Stan ever found it? Nobody knows. Mystery number 9. The Bottomless Pit. The show establishes a literal bottomless pit near Gravity Falls that the characters visit and use for disposing of things they do not want. It functions in the episode as a comedic setting for a series of stories. But the bottomless pit, taken seriously for a moment, is a physical impossibility unless you are at a dimensional convergence point. Things thrown into it eventually come back. The rules of the pit seem to involve a loop rather than a true bottomless fall, suggesting it connects to something on the other side. Ford's journals document it but do not explain it fully. What is the other side of the bottomless pit? Where do things actually go when they fall in? Mystery number 10. The Weird Bubbles in the Forest. Scattered throughout the show's background art and environmental design are strange formations, colors that do not quite match, lights that move without a source, shapes that appear between trees and then are gone when you look directly at them. These are not all explicitly addressed. Some are clearly Easter eggs. Others feel more deliberate, like the show is trying to establish that Gravity Falls is stranger even in its quiet moments than anything the characters have directly engaged with. There is a sense, built carefully over 2 seasons, that Dipper and Mabel only ever scratch the surface. That the town holds more than 3 journals could ever catalog. Ford spent 6 years in Gravity Falls and documented over 100 anomalies. 6 years for someone with his intelligence and dedication should have been enough to make a significant dent in the town's mysteries. But by the time he is pulled through the portal, Ford is still writing question marks. He is still finding things. The town was generating new strange events faster than he could catalog them. A supernatural hotspot does not exhaust itself. It simply keeps producing. The implication is that 100 years of research might reveal more layers without ever reaching the bottom. And that, right there, is the most honest thing the show tells you. Gravity Falls is not a mystery to be solved. It is a mystery to be lived in, explored, appreciated for what it does not reveal as much as for what it does. If you are watching this and loving the cozy energy we are building here tonight, drop a comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. I love knowing who is out there in the dark with me. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button now so you never miss a night like this one. Section 2. The Dream Demon. Bill Cipher and Everything We Still Do Not Know. There's a sentence that plays backwards at the very end of Bill Cipher's final appearance in the show, as he dissolves into Stan's memory-wiped mind. If you slow it down, if you reverse it, if you listen carefully enough in the silence after everything has ended, you hear AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. He was calling for Ibarra God, and the god was listening. Bill Cipher is one of the most deliberately mysterious antagonists in the history of animated television, and he was designed that way from the ground up. According to Alex Hirsch in various interviews and commentaries, Bill was originally conceived as a one-shot villain, a dream demon who would appear in a single episode and never return. But the character had too much gravity to stay contained. His presence in the show's symbolism, on the rug of the Mystery Shack, in the window of the shack's attic, in Ford's cave paintings, in Ford's paranoid nightmare drawings, made him feel like he had always been there, like he was woven into the fabric of the show before the show even knew it needed him. And so he stayed and grew and became the axis around which the entire series eventually rotated. But here's the thing about Bill Cipher. For all the lore the show provides, for all the details packed into the journals and the cryptograms and the reverse audio messages, he remains one of the most genuinely unexplained entities in modern animation. The more you learn about him, the more questions you have. Mystery number 11. What was Bill's true name? He goes by Bill Cipher, which the show confirms is essentially a dimensional username, a simplified label designed for ease of communication with what he dismissively calls lower dimensional beings. In a Reddit AMA posted on April Fool's Day 2015, a character claiming to be Bill wrote, "You bet I know his true name. If I had a name that stupid, I'd use a nickname too." Speaking of names, Bill Cipher is basically a dimensional username, a primitive grunt designed for your analog ears. If you heard my true name, you'd evaporate to dust with an expression of horror and ecstasy on your face, which would be fun but would probably ruin the rug. His true name has never been revealed. It is described as something that causes instant destruction in those who hear it. A name that the human mind cannot contain. This is a deliberate mystery, one that Alex Hirsch has never resolved and likely never will, because the point is not the name itself. The point is the terror of the idea that there are things in the universe whose true nature cannot be communicated in any language we possess. Mystery number 12. How old is Bill, really? The show describes him as existing for over 1 trillion years. He originated in a two-dimensional universe called Euclidia, a flat plane of existence inspired directly by Edwin Abbott Abbott's novel Flatland. He was born there, lived there, and then destroyed it. After the destruction of Euclidia, he moved to the Nightmare Realm, the chaotic, physics-free space between dimensions, where he spent incomprehensible ages before setting his sights on the third dimension. 1 trillion years is a number so vast it loses meaning. For context, the universe itself is only about 13.8 billion years old. Bill predates our universe. He has seen realities form and collapse. He has watched dimensions burn out like candles. And yet he is described throughout the show as having something almost like loneliness, something almost like homesickness. This entity, this ancient impossible thing, misses his home. He burned it himself, and he misses it. Mystery number 13. Why did Bill really destroy Euclidia? The official account, delivered both in the show and in various expanded lore materials, is that Bill grew bored and dissatisfied with the flat, limited world of Euclidia. He could see the third dimension, a unique ability among his people, and he wanted to show them what he saw. He wanted to liberate them. His attempt to show them the third dimension went catastrophically wrong and destroyed the dimension entirely. Bill then convinced himself that he had freed them from their dull lives. He performed a kind of psychological self-surgery to survive the guilt of what he had done. But the Book of Bill, a 2023 companion publication that expands on his backstory, complicates this considerably. The book hints that the destruction of Euclidia may have been more accidental than Bill ever admitted to himself. He may have genuinely been trying to help, or at least to show his people something they could not perceive. And the destruction was an unintended consequence that he could not live with honestly. So he reframed it as liberation and buried the grief so deep that it expressed itself as chaos and cruelty instead. The TV Tropes character analysis for Bill notes that he shows a rare moment of genuine remorse in the Book of Bill when recounting the destruction, before immediately burying it again. He is, at his core, a being in unbearable, unacknowledged pain who has chosen destruction as a way of never having to feel it. Mystery number 14. What exactly is the Nightmare Realm, and is it still collapsing? The Nightmare Realm is described as an interdimensional space lacking consistent laws of physics. It is formless, chaotic, inherently unstable, and destined to eventually collapse in on itself. This inherent instability was the driving motivation behind all of Bill's scheming. He needed to escape before his home destroyed him. But after Weird Mageddon is reversed and Bill is apparently destroyed, the Nightmare Realm presumably continues. Its collapse was not something Bill's defeat would stop. The hench maniacs, his bizarre companions, are sucked back into the Nightmare Realm at the end of the show. They presumably still exist there, and the Nightmare Realm is still presumably collapsing. What happens when it finally does? Does its collapse send shockwaves into adjacent dimensions? Does it matter at all now that the dimensional rift that could have connected it to our world has been sealed? Mystery number 15. What is Bill actually made of? He is described as two-dimensional, which should be physically impossible in a three-dimensional world. When he manifests in our reality during Weird Mageddon, he takes a physical form, a towering figure made of golden light and geometry, a pyramid with arms and a single burning eye. But this form is clearly a performance, a choice, not his fundamental nature. His true nature is something that existing in the Nightmare Realm has shaped into something that transcends dimensional classification. The Mabel of the show calls him an isosceles monster in Dreamscaperers, which is funny but not quite right. A truly canonical description from the axolotl poem in the Choose Your Own Adventure book describes him as 60 degrees that come in threes, which refers to an equilateral triangle. But the show also suggests that Bill's shape, the simple yellow triangle with one eye, is itself a simplification, an approximation of something that our minds process as a triangle because we do not have the cognitive equipment to perceive what he actually is. Mystery number 16. Why could Bill not simply break out of the dimensional barrier on his own? For an entity of supposedly universe-level power, Bill spends an astonishing amount of time being unable to do things. He cannot cross the weirdness bubble surrounding Gravity Falls. He cannot enter a conscious mind without a handshake deal. He cannot possess something protected by unicorn hair. He cannot destroy the bubble created by Ford's equation. He cannot kill people he has trapped in his petrification without breaking certain apparent rules. The show consistently depicts him as powerful but constrained. Why? The most satisfying interpretation is that Bill's power is enormous in the Nightmare Realm where there are no laws, but in our dimension he is subject to the physics and the metaphysics of a more ordered universe. The rules do not apply to him in the way they apply to us, but they still apply. He is a chaos entity in a space that is fundamentally about structure, and structure binds him in ways he finds deeply frustrating. Mystery number 17. The Cipher Wheel and its Ancient Origins. Ford discovered the Zodiac in a cave painting left behind by the ancient inhabitants of the Gravity Falls Valley. These were people who encountered Bill thousands of years ago and figured out how to stop him. They figured out that 10 specific individuals aligned to 10 specific symbols, standing in the prescribed formation and holding hands, could generate enough power to destroy Bill permanently. They encoded this in cave paintings and left it as a warning and a weapon simultaneously. But who were these people? The show calls them the Ancient Peoples, or the natives of Gravity Falls, without giving them a more specific identity or culture. Where did they come from? How did they learn to construct a working anti-demon Zodiac? Did they receive help from the axolotl or some other powerful entity? Did someone teach them, or did they work it out on their own? Mystery number 18. The Zodiac symbols and their selection. The 10 symbols on the Zodiac are a pine tree, a shooting star, a question mark, an ice bag, a crescent, a pentagram, a six-fingered hand, a llama, a sewn heart, and a pair of square glasses. Each symbol corresponds to one of the 10 people who must stand in the circle. Dipper is the pine tree, Mabel is the shooting star, Seuss is the question mark, Wendy is the ice bag, Stan is the crescent, Gideon is the pentagram, Ford is the six-fingered hand, Pacifica is the llama, Robbie is the sewn heart, and McGucket is the square glasses. The symbols were apparently prophesied long before any of these people were born. The pine tree symbol appears on merchandise and promotional material throughout the show's history. The shooting star is on Mabel's sweater in the very first episode. These are not symbols the characters chose. The symbols chose the characters. But why these 10 people? Why these specific symbols? The ancient prophecy had to describe symbols that would eventually map to people living in a very specific future moment. Either the prophecy was written after Bill's defeat, working backwards from knowledge of who eventually stood in the circle, or it was genuinely predictive. And if it was genuinely predictive, someone with the ability to see forward through time made it. The axolotl is the most obvious candidate, but nothing is confirmed. Mystery number 19. What does the axolotl actually want? The axolotl is introduced in a semi-canonical choose-your-own-adventure book called Dipper and Mabel and the Curse of the Time Pirate's Treasure, the canonical status of which is complicated, but which Alex Hirsch confirmed contained at least one enormous canon secret. The axolotl is described as a powerful extra-dimensional entity whose power ranks above even Bill Cipher and the Time Baby. It takes the form of an enormous talking axolotl floating in the space between spaces. In the book, Dipper asks it about Bill, and it responds with a poem that contains lines like, "Says he's happy, he's a liar," and "If he wants to shirk the blame, he'll have to invoke my name." After Weirdmageddon, the Book of Bill shows Bill calling out to the axolotl and receiving a response that suggests the axolotl offered him a path to redemption, a way to absolve his crime by becoming a different form, a different time. Bill's last backwards message invokes the axolotl's name, which means he either took or attempted to take this offer. But what the offer actually entails, whether Bill Cipher could be reincarnated in a new form in a different time, walking the world without memory of who he was, beginning again from some clean starting point, remains completely unresolved. It is one of the show's most beautiful and most frustrating open threads. Mystery number 20. Is Bill actually dead? Let us sit with this one. Stan punches Bill in the eye inside Stan's own mind while the memory-erasing gun is running. Bill is erased along with Stan's memories of himself. This should be lethal, at least within the logic of the show. Bill is a mind-based entity, and destroying the mind hosting him while he is inside it should be equivalent to destroying him. The golden light of his form shatters. The henchmaniacs are sucked back to the nightmare realm. Weirdmageddon ends. But Bill's final whispered words played in reverse are an invocation. He is calling for the axolotl. He is asking in his last moment for a second chance. Alex Hirsch has been deliberately evasive about this. In the Disney Insider interview after the finale aired, he said that Gravity Falls is a show about mystery, and that answering every question would be counter to the spirit of the series. He said there are some things we will never know. Whether Bill Cipher is truly gone or merely dormant somewhere is one of those things. And it is meant to be. Mystery number 21. What was Bill doing for the thousands of years between the ancient inhabitants leaving Gravity Falls and Ford's arrival? He was clearly active. The show hints at this. The cave paintings suggest ongoing interaction with humanity across centuries. But the specific timeline of what Bill was doing between 1000 AD and the 1980s is blank. He was in the nightmare realm, theoretically, but he clearly made other deals, influenced other people. Ford's journals suggest that Bill described himself to Ford as a muse who inspired a genius intellectual every century, which means Ford was not his first. Who were the others? What did they build for him? Mystery number 22. Bill and the color yellow. Bill is yellow. Specifically, he is the bright, warm, artificial yellow of a signal, of something demanding attention, of the sun when it has a particular kind of menace. In color theory, yellow is associated with intellect and communication, and also with cowardice and treachery. Bill is all of these things. His color is not passive. It announces him. Every time you see yellow in Gravity Falls, in the rug of the Mystery Shack, in a dream sequence's lighting, in the flash of an eye at the edge of a frame, the show is trying to tell you that Bill is present, or has been present, or will be present. Yellow is the color of his surveillance. Whether this was a decision made early in the show's development and maintained with intention, or whether it accumulated as a meaning over time through repeated association, the result is the same. Yellow in Gravity Falls has a specific emotional charge that it does not carry in any other show. And then there's the top hat. The monocle might belong to a prior researcher and remain unexplained. But the top hat belongs to Bill and apparently to his family before him. And everything the top hat communicates, formality, performance, the self-conscious construction of an appearance that implies gentility, says something specific about what Bill is and what he is not. He is not gentle, but he wants you to think he might be, just long enough. Section 3. The Mystery Shack and its Keeper. The Secrets of Stan Pines. If Gravity Falls has a heart that keeps beating, even when everything around it is going wrong, it is this. An old man in a fez who has been lying to everyone for 30 years because he loves his brother. Stanley Pines, born alongside his twin Stanford on the Jersey Shore a few decades before any of this began, is one of the most layered characters in animated television. He arrived in Gravity Falls as a fraud, a con artist, a man carrying someone else's name and someone else's crime, and a grief so deep he had built an entire life of noise around it to avoid having to feel it. The Mystery Shack was not, in the beginning, a labor of love. It was a distraction, a way to stay close to the machine that might eventually bring his brother home. The Mystery Shack itself has its own mysteries, layered into its walls and hidden behind its false panels and existing beneath its floorboards in the form of a laboratory that no tourist would ever stumble across. Mystery number 22. What is the full history of the Mystery Shack property before Ford? The property exists because Ford bought it with his grant money and built a research laboratory underneath it. But the physical shack, the building that Stan converted into a tourist trap, appears to have pre-existing structure. Where did the building come from? Who owned the land before Ford? The area around Gravity Falls has a history stretching back through the Northwest family and the Quentin Tremblay and the ancient peoples before either of them. The land the shack sits on is right in the forest, in the general zone where the most concentrated supernatural activity has always occurred. Was that choice deliberate on Ford's part? Did he build on that specific plot because the supernatural energy was concentrated there, making it the ideal research base? Mystery number 23. The Vending Machine Portal. The entrance to Ford's underground laboratory runs through a vending machine in the Mystery Shack's back room. This is the entrance Stan uses to access the portal machinery. The vending machine is one of the show's earliest unresolved background details. Attentive viewers noticed it in the very first episode. When Stan descends through it into whatever lies below, A moment shown clearly but without explanation, as if daring you to remember it. The portal beneath the shack was built by Ford and powered by radioactive energy sources. Stan maintained it for 30 years while running the shack above it as a cover. What is remarkable is that no tourist ever stumbled into it. 30 years of operation, thousands of visitors, and not one person ever found the secret laboratory. Either Stan was better at concealment than he ever let on, or the mystery of how he kept it hidden for that long is itself underexplored. Mystery number 24, the tattoo on Stan's arm. Stan has a tattoo that, when the show reveals it, turns out to be directly connected to Ford's work and to the portal. The tattoo was placed as foreshadowing from very early in the series. What exactly the tattoo represents in terms of Stan's personal history, and whether it was something he acquired as part of his mission to maintain the portal or for another reason entirely, is never fully explained. Mystery number 25. Stan's real memories after the reset. At the end of Weird McGucket, Stan sacrifices his memories of himself to destroy Bill. Ford uses the memory gun on Stan, wiping everything, and Bill is erased along with the contents of that mind. Then, through the twins telling Stan stories and reminding him of who he is, his memories begin to return. The ending of the show depicts Stan as restored, sailing with Ford on the Stano War, seemingly himself again. But the show also hints very subtly that the restoration may not be complete, that some things Stan once knew are simply gone. What did Stan lose permanently in that reset? Which specific memories did not come back? The show does not say, and that unanswered question hangs over the warm, triumphant ending like a thin cloud that everyone is choosing, politely, not to look at directly. Mystery number 26. The Deception and the Alias. For 30 years, Stanley Pines lived in Gravity Falls pretending to be his twin brother. He used Ford's name, Ford's credentials, and Ford's home. He maintained this deception across 3 decades through the founding of the Mystery Shack, through the raising of a tourist trap empire, through encounters with local law enforcement, government agents, a psychic child, and eventually his own great-niece and great-nephew. The sheer scale of this fraud is staggering. And yet, Stan did it all not for money, not for power, but to maintain access to the portal that might bring his brother home. The entire Mystery Shack, the fake exhibits, the overpriced merchandise, the rig tours was just a funding mechanism for a 30-year rescue mission. When you understand that, the con artist becomes something else entirely. Mystery number 27. What happened to all the radioactive waste? Early in Season 2, the government agents investigating the Mystery Shack discover that Stan has been stockpiling radioactive material. This is presented as evidence against him. It is, of course, actually the fuel source for the interdimensional portal. After the portal is activated and Ford comes through, and Weird McGucket eventually runs its course, what happened to the radioactive waste? It is never addressed in the show's resolution. There is a suggestion that the portal machinery was eventually dismantled, but the specifics of how Stan disposed of, or failed to dispose of, a significant quantity of radioactive fuel is left entirely to the imagination. Mystery number 28. The Stan-shaped hole in town history. For 30 years, the real Stanley Pines was officially dead. A newspaper clipping shown in Season 2 reveals that Stan Pines was reported deceased years before the show takes place. But Stan was clearly walking around Gravity Falls this whole time, talking to people, running a business, interacting with local government for various permits and disputes. How did nobody notice? How did no one in Gravity Falls put together that the man running the Mystery Shack had the same name and face as someone who was supposed to be dead? The town's collective blind eye, reinforced by the actual Blind Eye Society, provides partial cover. But the society erased memories of supernatural events, not of human fraud. Mystery number 29. Ford's other journals. There are 3 known journals: Journal 1, Journal 2, and Journal 3. They were distributed across different locations, hidden and protected in different ways, and they form a sequence of Ford's research that spans his entire time in Gravity Falls. But Ford spent 6 years in the town before being pulled through the portal. He documented hundreds of anomalies across 3 journals. That is a remarkable volume of detailed scientific and paranormal documentation, and yet the journals as we see them still feel incomplete. They reference creatures that are never shown. They hint at experiments that are never described. There are pages with invisible ink that require special treatment to read. There are coded sections within sections. The suggestion is that the 3 journals we see are the cleaned-up, curated version of Ford's research, and that the full scope of what he found and documented was far larger. Mystery number 30. What happened to the Mystery Shack after the show ended? The final episode shows Dipper and Mabel leaving on the bus back home at the end of summer. Stan and Ford sail away together. Seuss is left in charge of the Mystery Shack, which is confirmed in the finale. But the show ends before we see what Gravity Falls becomes in the aftermath of McGucket. A town that was publicly turned into a supernatural nightmare zone and then restored is going to have to reckon with what happened. The people of Gravity Falls cannot have their memories erased again because the Blind Eye Society has been disbanded. They all remember, at least to some degree, the events of McGucket. What does a town do with that? What does Seuss do with a mystery shack in a town that no longer needs to pretend the supernatural is fake? These are questions Alex Hirsch described as things he would explore in a potential video game continuation that, as of his most recent interview, he still has not found a home for. Section 4. The Pines Family. Twins, Secrets, and the Weight of Who You Are. There is a theme at the center of Gravity Falls that runs under everything else the way a river runs under a forest, felt in the ground before you ever see the water. The theme is twins, duality, the question of how much of who you are is the person beside you, and what happens when that person is gone. Dipper and Mabel are twins, Stan and Ford are twins. The show is built on reflections, on people who carry a piece of each other, on the way 2 people raised together can end up on opposite sides of everything and still love each other with the specific, irreplaceable love that only shared origin can create. Mystery number 31. What is Dipper's real name? This is perhaps the most famous unresolved personal mystery in the show. Dipper's nickname comes from the Big Dipper-shaped birthmark on his forehead. His real name has been referenced but never stated on screen. Alex Hirsch has been asked about this in dozens of interviews and has consistently refused to give a definitive answer. In the Disney Insider interview after the finale, he confirmed that Journal 3 would address what Dipper's real name was, but described it as having interesting significance to the lore of Gravity Falls, without altering the actual plot. One writer joked in an online discussion that it might be Lominic, a mashup of Llama and Dominic. In one episode, he is briefly referred to as Roderick by an antagonist who does not know him well. The real name, whatever it is, feels like something the show deliberately withheld for a reason that goes beyond simple teasing. If his real name connects to the lore in the way Hirsch hinted, then knowing it might change how you understand the entire show, which is either the most exciting possible truth or the best reason to never reveal it. Mystery number 32. Dipper's birthmark in the Big Dipper constellation. The Big Dipper is an asterism, not a true constellation, formed by the brightest stars of Ursa Major. It has been used for navigation for thousands of years across dozens of cultures, almost universally as a tool for finding north. Dipper Pines has this exact shape marked on his forehead. He arrives in a town that his great uncle has been studying for 6 years. He finds a journal 3 days after arriving, hidden in the forest in a metal compartment in a tree. He is 12 years old, curious, detail-oriented, and has a supernatural ability to notice things other people miss. The birthmark functions narratively as a signal. This person is oriented toward truth. This person knows how to find the way. But the show never explicitly connects the birthmark to the supernatural mechanics of the town. Is it truly just a birthmark? Or is it, in a world where everything means something, a mark of some greater significance? Mystery number 33. Why do the twins' parents never appear in the show? Dipper and Mabel's parents are mentioned twice across the entire series, both times in passing and never shown on screen. They apparently made the decision to send their 12-year-old children to spend the summer with a great uncle in a town they presumably know very little about. This is the inciting premise of the show, and it is treated as unremarkable. But the parents' complete absence from the narrative across a summer full of life-threatening supernatural events that their children were directly involved in raises questions that feel intentional. Are the parents deliberately kept off-screen for narrative economy, or is there something about them the show was not ready to address? In a show where every background detail is potentially meaningful, the complete erasure of the parental figures feels like a choice. Mystery number 34. What did Ford actually find in the other dimensions during his 30 years away? Ford entered the portal in the early 1980s and did not return until Dipper and Mabel's summer. He spent 30 years traveling between dimensions. His journals, written before his disappearance, are our main record of his Gravity Falls research. But 30 years of additional research conducted across countless dimensions presumably produced volumes of new knowledge. Ford mentions encounters with the Xanthar of Dimension 52, with alternate versions of himself, with technologies and beings that make his original Gravity Falls research look elementary. But the show touches on this only briefly. Journal 3's published edition hints at some of what he found, but the scope of Ford's extra-dimensional education is one of the show's great underexplored territories. Mystery number 35. Was Ford changed by 30 years of dimensional travel in ways that are never fully addressed? When Ford emerges from the portal, he is older, harder, and more paranoid than when he went in. He has a metal plate in his head to prevent Bill from accessing his mind. He is immediately hostile towards Stan in a way that feels disproportionate, even accounting for their long history of grievance. He is secretive with Dipper in ways that occasionally feel less like protection and more like control. He is brilliant and brave and genuine in his care for his great niece and nephew, but he is also clearly marked by decades of isolation, by the specific kind of damage that comes from being alone and hunted across dimensions for 30 years. The show explores this, but incompletely. Ford's psychological state after his return, and the specific events that shaped it, remain only partially mapped. Mystery number 36. What is the full story of Stanford and Stanley's falling out, and is it truly resolved? The backstory of how the brothers became estranged is delivered in A Tale of Two Stans, the centerpiece episode of the season. Stan accidentally destroyed Ford's perpetual motion machine, which had been submitted to a competition that would have earned Ford a scholarship to an elite university. Their father, a cold and mercenary man primarily interested in money and status, threw Stan out of the house for destroying the opportunity. Ford blamed Stan. Stan blamed Ford's selfishness in not coming to his defense. They did not speak for years. When Ford finally reached out for help, it was because Bill Cipher's influence had nearly driven him insane, and the message he sent was more desperate than reconciliatory. The brothers came back together under duress and never truly had the honest conversation their relationship required until it was almost too late. Even at the end of the show, sailing together on the Stan-O War, you sense that the conversation is still ongoing. That the 30 years of separation and the lifetime of competition and the wound of their father's favoritism have not been fully processed. The show gives them a warm ending because they deserve one. But warm endings and healed wounds are different things. Mystery number 37. Stan's supernatural resilience. In the finale, when Bill enters Stan's mind to torture him into revealing Ford's equation, Stan survives. He endures the mindscape confrontation. He has the presence of mind and the emotional endurance to make the plan work, even as his memories are being erased. The show attributes this to Stan being the twin whose mind Bill had never bothered to study, the boring, ordinary one that Bill dismissed. But there is something almost uncanny about how well Stan holds up inside his own head, under assault from a trillion-year-old chaos entity. Is it purely willpower? Is it love, specifically the love of his family, that gives him the structural solidity that Bill cannot fracture? Or is there something about Stan that even Bill underestimated on a more fundamental level? Mystery number 38. What does Mabel actually know? Mabel Pines is frequently underestimated by almost every character in the show, including occasionally her own brother. She is presented as the emotional, creative, unfocused half of the twin pair to Dipper's analytical, fact-oriented half. But Mabel is consistently, quietly more perceptive than anyone gives her credit for. She notices things. She feels the emotional truth of situations before her brother can analyze his way to the same conclusion. In sock opera, she outsmarts Bill Cipher, who has possession of Dipper's body and access to Dipper's analytical mind by exploiting the physical limitations of the body he is inhabiting. A 12-year-old girl outsmarted a trillion-year-old demon by knowing her own brother's body better than he did. The show repeatedly suggests that Mabel's power is of a fundamentally different kind than anything the supernatural world throws at them. A kind of warm, stubborn certainty about love and family that does not compute for beings like Bill. But the full extent of what Mabel understands, and what she has quietly decided not to ask about because she trusts that it will be okay, remains one of the show's most gentle mysteries. Mystery number 39. The clones. In the episode Double Dipper, Dipper uses a copying machine to create multiple versions of himself to help navigate a social situation. The clones are initially loyal, then begin to develop independent agendas, then are destroyed. Except the show makes a point of noting in a later credits sequence that two of them, Clone 3 and Clone 4, survived. They are shown in the final episode's credits. What happened to them? What is the status of two copies of Dipper Pines walking around somewhere, growing up, developing their own identities? This is played for mild comedy, but in a show this invested in identity and selfhood, the existence of surviving Dipper clones is actually a profound philosophical question in a yellow pine tree hat. Mystery number 40. Ford's perpetual motion machine. The original design that started everything. The machine Stan accidentally destroyed was the submission that would have taken Ford to a prestigious university. If it had not been destroyed, Ford would not have attended the second-tier school where he met McGucket. He would not have received the research grant that took him to Gravity Falls. He would never have summoned Bill Cipher. None of the events of the show would have happened. The destruction of one machine by a jealous and frightened boy kicked off a chain of consequences that led to a 30-year imprisonment and a near apocalypse. This is not a mystery so much as a meditation on causality, on how much of who we are is shaped by accidents we did not choose and would not have wanted. Ford has 6 fingers on each hand, and one day Stan tripped, and the world almost ended. That kind of contingency is both terrifying and, in a strange way, deeply human. Section 5. The Journals and the Codes. What was hidden in plain sight? Alex Hirsch built Gravity Falls as an interactive experience, and the cryptogram system he developed across 2 seasons was the mechanism through which the show communicated with its most dedicated audience. Every episode ended with a code. The codes changed across the show's run, escalating in complexity in ways that mirrored the escalating depth of the show's mysteries. Season 1's early codes use simple Caesar ciphers, shifting the alphabet by a fixed number of positions. Later episodes moved to @bash cipher, then to A1Z26 substitution, then to keyed visionaire cipher, each escalation requiring the audience to find the key within the episode itself, encouraging the kind of attentive, active viewing that the show rewarded. Mystery number 41. The final cryptogram of the series finale. The last coded message at the end of Weird McGucket 3 Take Back the Falls, when decoded, reads, "Goodbye, Gravity Falls." Not farewell, not see you soon. Goodbye. It is written in the voice of the show itself, as if the town is speaking, or the journals are speaking, or Ford is speaking from somewhere very quiet on the other side of a closed door. It is final in a way that the other cryptograms were not. And yet the axolotl poem and Bill's backwards message and everything we have discussed suggests that the story is not finished. Goodbye might not mean over. It might mean, in the language of a show that always had 2 meanings for everything, this chapter is done. The next one is yours to imagine. Mystery number 42. The Monocle on Journal 3. This one is small and strange and easy to miss. Journal 3, as it first appears in Tourist Trapped, has a monocle attached to its spine. Ford wears glasses, not a monocle. No character in the main cast uses a monocle. The monocle is never explained. The Gravity Falls fan community documented it, and it was included in the Tumblr list of officially unsolved mysteries. Its presence is clearly deliberate since Ford's design is too meticulous for accidental props. Does the monocle belong to someone we never meet? Was there a researcher before Ford? Does it connect to the Blind Eye Society, whose symbol is literally an eye? Is it symbolic of a single eye, Bill's single eye, somehow attached to the record of his greatest target? Mystery number 43. The invisible ink sections of the journals. The published version of Journal 3 includes sections that are only visible under blacklight or with special treatment. These sections contain additional notes from Ford that he wrote in invisible ink specifically to hide them even from anyone who might find the journal. The content of the invisible sections adds detail about creatures, about Ford's own psychological state, about warnings that go beyond what the regular text says. But the invisible ink was a real-world design choice for the published book. In the show's universe, the question is what else Ford wrote that he made invisible, and why those specific sections required that level of protection. What was he afraid of that he could not even write in a book he had already hidden? Mystery number 44. The Visionaire cipher keys hidden inside episodes. Starting in episode 21 of the show, the cryptograms switch to keyed Visionaire cipher, which requires a specific keyword to decode. The keys were hidden inside the episodes themselves, requiring attentive viewers to find them within the visual content, in background text, in signs, in details that most people would scroll past without noticing. This was the show deliberately demanding more from its most engaged viewers. But the experience of finding those keys, of decoding those messages, of discovering that the show had been hiding an entire layer of conversation with you, is a uniquely specific kind of joy. Many of the decoded messages are teases or jokes or misdirections. A few are genuinely revelatory. The process of engagement matters as much as the specific secrets it reveals. Mystery number 45. Stan is not what he seems. This phrase appears in the opening theme song as a decoded cryptogram. It also serves as the title of the episode that reveals Stan's true identity. The phrase has been visible in every single episode of the show since the very first one, encoded in the theme, waiting for someone to find it. Anyone who decoded the opening sequence early enough would have known from episode 1 that Stan was hiding something significant. But the phrase does not reveal what he is hiding, only that there is something to hide. And in a show where everything turns out to mean something, the placement of this message in the opening theme, where it plays before every single episode, is less a secret and more a constant, patient promise. The show is always telling you. You just had to speak the language. Mystery number 46. The search for the blindy.com cryptogram. The end credits of Gideon Rises, when decoded, produce the message, "Search for the blind eye." This directed fans to an ARG, an alternate reality game built around the show's world. The Blind Eye Society was one of the show's most important Season 2 reveals, and it was telegraphed through an end credit cipher months before the reveal episode aired. The ARG extended the show's world into the real internet, making Gravity Falls secrets something you could chase on your actual laptop at 3 in the morning. This blurring of fiction and reality, of the show's world and the viewer's world, was intentional. It was designed to replicate the feeling of being Dipper Pines, of being the person who cannot stop pulling at threads. Mystery number 47. The symbol in the Blind Eye Society logo. The Blind Eye Society symbol is a crossed-out eye, an eye with an X through it. It appears as graffiti in multiple episodes before the society is directly revealed. In The Gulf War and Sue's and the Real Girl, visible in the background on walls and dumpsters. It is a simple design but a meaningful one. An eye that has been denied its function. Vision crossed out. The society's whole mission was to make people not see the supernatural truth of the town they lived in. Their symbol is their mission statement, but the symbol predates the society. It appears in contexts that suggest it has a history in Gravity Falls going back before Fiddleford McGucket founded the organization. Was there an older group using this symbol? Is it connected to the ancient inhabitants' cave paintings? Mystery number 48. The A1Z26 cipher as a transition. Season 1's second phase used the A1Z26 substitution cipher, where each letter is replaced by its numerical position in the alphabet. A equals 1, B equals 2, and so on. This cipher is simple but requires you to sit down with a pencil and work through it. The act of decoding it is itself a kind of commitment, a choice to spend time with the show rather than simply consuming it. The messages decoded through A1Z26 include some of the clearest foreshadowing in the series, including direct references to future plot points delivered months before the relevant episodes aired. People who did the work got told things first. This is the show's central philosophy applied to its own audience. Curiosity is rewarded. Mystery number 49. The binary codes. Several additional coded messages in the show's extended materials are written in binary. Binary, being the fundamental language of computation, carries its own layer of meaning in a show so concerned with Fiddleford McGucket's pioneering work in computing and his eventual descent into memory-erasing madness. The binary messages, when decoded, tend to be shorter and more cryptic than the episode end credits cryptograms. They read more like system outputs than narrative messages, as if the show has a machine intelligence running underneath it that occasionally surfaces to tell you something the human authored layers would prefer to keep quiet. Mystery number 50. The Gravity Falls. ARG and what it confirmed or denied. The alternate reality game surrounding Gravity Falls was one of the most sophisticated viewer engagement projects of its era. It involved real websites, hidden codes, real-world treasure hunts, and eventually the cipher hunt after the show ended, which sent fans across multiple continents following clues that eventually led to the discovery of a real physical Bill Cipher statue. The ARG exists in the liminal space between the show's world and the real world, and some of the information disclosed through it was explicitly canonical, confirmed by Hirsch. Other parts were presented as ambiguous, neither confirmed nor denied. The full map of what the ARG revealed and what it left mysterious is itself a subject of ongoing analysis. We know time travel is real in the show's universe because a coded website message says so directly. We know that certain coordinates mark real places. Beyond that, the boundary between what the ARG confirms and what it creates as fan mythology is porous and deliberately maintained. Section 6. Old Man McGucket and the Price of Forgetting. Of all the characters whose stories end in relief and redemption, Fiddleford Hadron McGucket's is the one that costs the most to get there. He is a genius, genuinely and spectacularly, in the tradition of the eccentric inventor whose mind runs so fast it outruns the track of ordinary living. He was, before Gravity Falls, a respected if unconventional computer scientist working out of a garage in Palo Alto, building the kind of personalized computing systems that Stanford himself described as ahead of their time. He was Ford's friend and collaborator, and the kind of mind that only appears once or twice in a generation. And then he accidentally glimpsed what was on the other side of an interdimensional portal, and something in him broke, and he spent the rest of his life trying to erase the damage, until he had erased so much that he was barely himself at all. Mystery number 51. What did McGucket actually see in the portal? The show gives us the answer in Journal 3 in the form of a note Ford made. McGucket glimpsed the kind of places where Bill Cipher likes to hang out. And in a later note, Ford records what specifically McGucket saw. Bill Cipher, in the nightmare realm, removing his own exoskeleton to feed. This image is never shown on screen, and the decision not to show it is itself a choice. The horror of what McGucket saw is meant to be beyond what can be depicted, existing in the imagination at a more uncomfortable resolution than any animation could render. But the structural question remains. Bill is a two-dimensional entity. Why does he have an exoskeleton? What was he feeding on? And why, of all the things Bill does that are visibly horrifying in the show, was this specific act the thing that permanently shattered McGucket's mind? Mystery number 52. What was McGucket's original contribution to the Portal project? The show establishes that McGucket was a genius mechanic and engineer who helped Ford build the interdimensional portal. Ford's six-fingered handwriting fills the journals, but the portal itself required engineering expertise that was not Ford's primary skill set. McGucket was building personalized computers while most of the technology industry was still imagining them. His contribution to the portal's technical construction must have been substantial, but the specifics of what he designed, what components he was responsible for, what aspects of the machine bore his particular genius rather than Ford's, are never detailed. Mystery number 53. The Society of the Blind Eye's founding and its first members. McGucket founded the society to help himself and others forget unbearable supernatural encounters. But the society grew far beyond its original compassionate purpose, And by the time it appears in season 2, it is an organization that erases memories, not just of trauma, but of anything it deems inconvenient, stealing the authentic experience of the supernatural from people who might otherwise have found ways to live with what they knew. McGucket did not intend this evolution. He was not around in any meaningful cognitive sense to guide it. The Society's transition from a mercy organization to a control mechanism happened while its founder was gradually losing himself to his own invention. Who exactly made the decisions that pushed the Society toward coercion? Blind Ivan is its leader in the present day, but how did he come to lead it? And what other individual shaped its more sinister phase of operation? Mystery number 54. How many memories were stored in the Hall of the Forgotten? When Dipper, Mabel, McGucket, Suze, and Wendy discover the Blind Eye Society's headquarters beneath the Gravity Falls Museum of History, they find the Hall of the Forgotten, a long corridor of glass tubes containing the removed memories of the town's inhabitants, organized by person and event. The visual impression is staggering. There are a lot of tubes, a lot of memories. This suggests that the Society was erasing memories frequently from many people over many years. The full scope of what was removed from the collective memory of Gravity Falls and what the town might be like if those memories were returned is enormous to contemplate. When the Society is disbanded and its members have their own memories erased, the Hall of the Forgotten still exists. Nobody goes back to return those memories. They are still there. Mystery number 55. McGucket's accent and identity drift. One of the darkest things the episode Society of the Blind Eye confirms is something that TV Tropes' recap notes as an in-universe Flanderization. McGucket's video log recordings show his speech patterns and accent becoming progressively more exaggerated as he wipes more and more of his memory. The original McGucket spoke normally. The later McGucket speaks in the exaggerated hillbilly patois that is his identifying characteristic in the show's present. This means that the eccentric, barely coherent old man who lives in a junkyard and talks to raccoons is not the real McGucket. He is a degraded iteration, a person who has accidentally erased so much of his own identity that the performance fills the space where the person used to be. By the show's end, McGucket begins to recover, reconnects with his son Tate, and regains some measure of himself. But how much of the original fiddle for McGucket can actually be recovered? What is the threshold beyond which a person cannot come back from? Mystery number 56. What is in McGucket's surviving video logs? The corrupted laptop that McGucket used to record his memories becomes a significant plot device in Season 2, specifically in the episode Into the Bunker, when Bill possesses Dipper to destroy it. Bill succeeds in destroying the laptop, which means whatever was on it, whatever McGucket had recorded in those video logs over years of self-erasure, is gone. We see fragments, we hear fragments. But the full record of what McGucket witnessed, what he documented, what he was trying to preserve even as he destroyed his ability to remember it, has been deliberately and permanently removed from the record. Bill knew what was on that laptop, that is why he destroyed it. And that means the laptop contains something important enough that an entity capable of almost anything decide eliminating it was worth the specific effort of possessing a 12-year-old's body to do it. Mystery number 57. The mystery of McGucket's son, Tate. Tate McGucket appears briefly in the show as a ranger at Lake Gravity Falls, and the two clearly have a strained, damaged relationship. The cause of the damage is obvious enough to infer. McGucket's deterioration and his abandonment of normal family life in favor of junkyard existence and memory-wiped incomprehension. But Tate's specific experience of having a genius father progressively erase himself into incoherence. and the feelings Tate carries about that experience are never explored in any depth. The show's ending shows McGucket on the road to recovery, which implies he and Tate may eventually have something like a reconciliation. But the intervening years of that relationship, the specific shape of the damage, are unexplored. Mystery number 58. What was McGucket going to build with the portal? One of the things we know from the show is that McGucket was a computing pioneer before he was Ford's assistant. He had already been helping Ford prove theories about the universe being a hologram by the time they met. If the portal had been completed as Bill intended, and if McGucket had not glimpsed the horror of Bill's reality and fled, what might McGucket have gone on to build? His mind was easily the equivalent of Ford's, merely in different disciplines. If the two of them had remained partners, if the portal had served its stated purpose rather than Bill's hidden one, what kind of science could two geniuses have produced in Gravity Falls over the following decades? This is a thought experiment rather than a mystery, but in a show so interested in what might have been, it feels worth sitting with. Section 7. Creatures of Gravity Falls. What was never fully explained. The town of Gravity Falls is home to approximately 173 documented anomalies, by Ford's count across 3 journals. The show directly depicts or references perhaps 50 to 60 of these. The rest live in the margins, in passing references, in journal pages the camera pans past without lingering, in cryptogram clues that suggest creatures the episodes never find time to feature. This section is for the ones that got enough screen time to be deeply interesting, but not enough to be fully understood. Mystery number 59. The Shapeshifter's True Origin. The Shapeshifter, also known as Experiment 210, is a creature that hatched from an egg Ford found while excavating the forest. Ford raised it, named it Shifty, studied its abilities with the careful dedication of a scientist who genuinely cares about his subject. The creature can take the form of anything it has seen, can mimic voices, can blend multiple forms together. Its true form is an amorphous white entity with multiple limbs and blank purple eyes. The connection to the alien spacecraft buried beneath the town is made explicit by a decoded message in the ship. Specimen has escaped, is changing forms. This confirms that the shapeshifter, or an ancestor of it, came from space, was a passenger on or experiment of the alien craft, and escaped when the ship crashed. But who put it on the ship? Was it a biological weapon, a research specimen, an exotic animal? A native intelligence of whatever world the ship came from? The shapeshifter has been in Ford's bunker for decades. After being refrozen at the end of the Into the Bunker episode, it presumably remains there. Unless it thawed again during Weirdmageddon, which is, possible. Mystery number 60. The Gobblewonker of Lake Gravity Falls. In the second episode of the show, Dipper and Mabel set out to photograph the legendary Gobblewonker, a Loch Ness-style lake monster. The Gobblewonker they find is a mechanical decoy built by Old Man McGucket. The real Gobblewonker is briefly seen in the background, lurking in the depths of the lake. Just that. A glimpse. A massive prehistoric creature living in the lake outside of town. Never acknowledged again by any character, never appearing in any subsequent episode. It is simply there. It was always there. The entire adventure of the episode was built around finding this creature, and the episode resolved itself with the revelation of the mechanical fraud, neatly sidestepping the enormous lake predator that the show confirmed actually exists and then declined to address. Mystery number 61. The Gnomes and their mysterious societal structure. The gnomes of Gravity Falls are 10 inches tall, apparently woodland dwelling, capable of combining their bodies into enormous humanoid constructions through collective coordination and deeply, tragically committed to finding a queen. Their entire social order is organized around the absence of a queen, around the desperate, ongoing search for one. They initially mistake Mabel for a candidate, which motivates the entire first episode's conflict. They later acquire Gideon as a substitute queen, which they seem willing to accept because apparently any sapient being will do if they are sufficiently willing. The gnome's world, with its internal politics and taverns, a gnome tavern called Nasty's is mentioned, and its highly specialized labor roles. Each gnome named in the show is responsible for operating a specific body part of the Norman construct, suggests a rich, chaotic civilization that the show only ever glimpsed from the outside. Mystery number 62, The Hide Behind. The Hide Behind is a creature from real American folklore, specifically from the tall tales of 19th century loggers in the great northern forests. And the show incorporates it faithfully. It is a creature that is never seen because it is always behind you. You turn to look, and it has hidden. You catch movement in your peripheral vision, but when you direct your gaze, there is nothing. Dipper encounters the hide behind in one of the Dipper's Guide to the Unexplained shorts, and ultimately accepts that he cannot prove its existence because its existence is contingent on not being observed. This is, philosophically, one of the most interesting creatures in the entire show. A being whose fundamental nature is to be unknown. It cannot be caught. It cannot be photographed. It cannot be studied. It will always be behind you. The cryptogram in the shapeshifter's journal entry asks, "Am I me? Is he me?" Which could be read as a companion question to the hide-behind's existence. If a creature is never directly perceived, in what sense can we say it is what it is? Mystery number 63. The Gremloblin. The Gremloblin is a creature that, when you look it in the eyes, causes you to see your worst nightmares. It was one of McGucket's first supernatural encounters, the experience that first prompted him to use the memory-erasing device on himself. The show depicts the Gremloblin briefly in Boss Mabel as a potential exhibit for the mystery shack that Dipper attempts to display. The episode handles it with comedy, but the creature's specific power, inducing personalized nightmare visions through eye contact, raises questions the show never answers. Where does the nightmare vision come from? Is the Gremloblin accessing the victim's own memory and fear architecture? Or does it project something from its own experience of horror? Is there something the Gremloblin itself has seen, somewhere in its own history, that it shares with those unfortunate enough to meet its gaze? Mystery number 64. The time anomalies that Blendin was sent to fix. Blendin is a time traveler from the year 207,012, roughly speaking. He is sent back to Gravity Falls specifically to fix a set of time anomalies. The show implies, and Dipper and Mabel eventually confirm, that they are accidentally responsible for creating those anomalies through their own time travel adventures in The Time Traveler's Pig. But the scope of the time anomalies in Gravity Falls goes beyond what two kids did with a time machine over one summer. The whole town is a temporal mess, intersecting with multiple timelines, touched by Bill Cipher's dimensional manipulations across thousands of years, and now additionally affected by the portal's operation. The time anomalies Blendin was sent to fix were the least of it, and the Time Bureau he works for, such as it exists, never really addresses the root cause. Mystery number 65. The Time Baby's fate after Weirdmageddon. In the events leading into Weirdmageddon, the Time Baby, a giant infant from the future who serves as the effective law enforcement authority of the time-space continuum, attempts to stop Bill with a strike force of time police. Bill destroys them all. Blendin is the only survivor. After Bill's defeat, Blendin mentions that it will take the Time Baby approximately 1,000 years for its molecules to reconstitute from the destruction. The Ghost Mailbox episode mentions the year 3012 as the end of the world. That is almost exactly 1,000 years from the show's present day. When the Time Baby reconstitutes in the year 3012, it is apparently going to be very angry. Whether that constitutes a world-ending event or just a very unpleasant bureaucratic situation for the time-traveling community is technically an unresolved question that spans as a millennium. Mystery number 66. The Unicorns and Why They Are Liars. The last Mabelcorn reveals that unicorns in Gravity Falls are not the pure, benevolent creatures of legend, but rather complacent, self-satisfied entities who gatekeep their magical hair behind arbitrary moralizing. They tell Mabel she is not pure enough of heart to receive unicorn hair for Ford's mind protection spell. Mabel spends the episode doubting herself before Grenda, Candy, and Wendy stage a unicorn heist and discover that the unicorns have been lying, that purity of heart has nothing to do with it, and that the unicorns simply do not want to share. The unicorn Celesta Bellabethabel is revealed to have given the same speech about insufficient purity to everyone who ever asked, regardless of who they were. This is funny, and it makes a point about how institutions use the language of moral gatekeeping to maintain power and comfort. But it also raises a question. If unicorn hair has genuine magical properties capable of protecting a mind from a trillion-year-old demon, where does that magic actually come from? Is the hair magical because of what unicorns are, or because of what they have been doing with their time in Gravity Falls? Could any unicorn in any context produce the same effect, or is it specific to this particular location? Mystery number 67. The gnomes' origin and relation to humans. The gnomes of Gravity Falls appear to be ancient, established residents of the forest. They have their own taverns, their own social hierarchy, their own traditions and governance structure. They clearly predate the Mystery Shack and possibly predate the Northwest family. How long have gnomes been in this specific valley? Did they come from another dimension like most of Gravity Falls anomalies? Or are they native to this world? The show notes that most supernatural anomalies in Gravity Falls came from other dimensions. If gnomes crossed from another dimension, when and how, and what was their world of origin like? Mystery number 68. The Manotaur Society. Dipper vs. Manliness introduces the Manotaurs, a community of bull-headed, hyper-masculine creatures who live in a mountain cave and have developed a rich social culture around physical strength and performative toughness. They have a predator they fear, the multi-bear, and elaborate rituals around confronting it. They take Dipper in as a student, train him, and eventually acknowledge him after he refuses to harm the multi-bear who just wants to listen to pop music. The Manotaurs are one of many examples of the show building a fully realized culture for a creature that appears in only one episode. Their complex relationship with strength and fear, with the performance of invulnerability as a social requirement, feels pointed. But what else is going on in Manotaur society? What is their history? Where do they come from? Are they native to Gravity Falls or another import from elsewhere? Section 8. The government, the agents, and the cover-up. One of the most quietly unsettling aspects of Gravity Falls is the implication that the United States government knows, at least partially, what is happening in this town, and has been managing the information for a very long time. Mystery number 69. Agents' powers and trigger. These two government agents, introduced in Scary Oak at the start of Season 2, are investigating the supernatural activity of Gravity Falls. They have been watching the Pines family. They have surveillance on the Mystery Shack. They are hidden in the background of episodes throughout the season, at the mall, outside Seuss's car, at the music festival. Once you know they are there, you see them everywhere. Their presence raises several questions the show never fully answers. How long have they been watching the town? What agency do they work for? What do they already know when the season begins? Mystery number 70. The Northwest Cover-Up and Government Complicity. The Northwest Cover-Up is a government conspiracy at least 150 years old. Quentin Tremblay, the 8.5 President of the United States, discovered and founded Gravity Falls in 1842. He was subsequently impeached and erased from official history by the government, which replaced him with Nathaniel Northwest as the official founder of the town. The government's motivation for the cover-up is stated to be the general eccentricity and political embarrassment of Tremblay's presidency. But Tremblay knew about Gravity Falls. He chose it deliberately. And the government, by erasing his connection to it, was also erasing its own knowledge of what the town represented. Was this purely political embarrassment management? Or was there a deeper reason to sever the official connection between the American government and a town that was a known supernatural nexus? Mystery number 71. What does Tremblay's survival mean for American history? The episode Irrational Treasure reveals that Tremblay preserved himself in peanut brittle and was found still alive and apparently still viable in an underground cave beneath the Gravity Falls Cemetery. He is unfrozen, still essentially himself, still carrying presidential authority that has been technically unrevoked. The government agents in the episode, rather than dealing with the political impossibility of a living centuries-old president, simply give Dipper and Mabel a vacation and a document declaring them America's most diligent youngsters, which is the show's way of saying the government would rather give a 12-year-old a certificate than deal with this. That tracks. But Tremblay's survival, never addressed after this episode, is a dangling thread. He is still out there. He is still arguably the 8.5 President of the United States, and the government that covered him up is still operating. Mystery number 72. Agent triggers fate in the finale. Both agents are present in Gravity Falls during the lead-up to Weirdmageddon. During the events of the apocalypse, various characters are petrified by Bill's eye bats. The fates of individual characters during Weirdmageddon are tracked with varying levels of detail. The agents are accounted for in some form, but their post-Weirdmageddon situation is never clearly established. Do they write a report? Are they believed? Does their agency have a protocol for what to do when a supernatural apocalypse involving an interdimensional demon has technically happened to a small Oregon town? Given that the events of Weirdmageddon were apparently not secret, there being media coverage from reporter Chandra Jimenez during the event itself, the aftermath in terms of official government response is a completely unaddressed area. Mystery number 73. 3. The Department of Temporal Anomalies. Blendin Blandin works for an organization that polices time travel in the future. The existence of this organization implies a future Earth with organized, institutionalized time travel capability. It implies that the time anomalies of Gravity Falls are known about and tracked in the historical record of this future. It implies that people from the future can come back to specific moments in Gravity Falls and interact with events there. The Time Baby appears to run this organization, but the full structure and scope of the department and what it knows about the history of Gravity Falls are never established. There is a story about the future, about the world after Weirdmageddon was reversed and Gravity Falls went on and time travel became normalized, that the show never tells. Mystery number 74. 74. The memory gun technology and its origins. The memory erasing device that McGucket built and that the Blind Eye Society used was a piece of technology that, by any reasonable assessment, should not exist. McGucket built it in the years around 1980 as a personalized coping mechanism, working from his background in computing and applied engineering. But the device works on brain function in a way that our real-world neuroscience cannot account for. It does not just suppress memories, it physically removes them, stores them in glass tubes, and allows them to be later reviewed in a kind of memory projection system. The entire technological suite of the Blind Eye Society headquarters, the circular memory gun, the pneumatic tube storage system, the Hall of the Forgotten projection architecture is decades ahead of what any Earth-based engineer should have been able to build in the early 1980s. Did McGucket receive technological inspiration from somewhere unusual? Was some of this technology adapted from things Ford had built or described in the months they worked together? Is there a connection to the alien spacecraft buried beneath the town? Section 9. Time, Memory, and What Cannot Be Undone. In a show so invested in the mechanics of memory, it makes sense that time itself is treated as a subject of active concern rather than passive background. The town of Gravity Falls exists at the intersection of multiple timelines, multiple dimensional weak points, and multiple histories that may or may not coexist. Time in this universe is not a river moving in one direction. It is more like a tree branching at every decision point, with occasionally the possibility of climbing back down to an earlier branch if you have the right equipment. Mystery number 75. The Time Traveler's Pig and the Butterfly Effect. The episode that introduces Blendin Blandin also demonstrates, in a small and heartbreaking way, how causally tangled Gravity Falls already is. Dipper uses the time tape to try to correct a moment at the mystery fair, going back repeatedly to fix things, and in doing so creates the anomalies that Blendin was sent to fix. This is a clean, simple time loop paradox. The act of trying to correct events creates the reason for a time traveler to show up. But the implications extend further. If Dipper and Mabel's summer in Gravity Falls is already part of a causal loop, already sewn into the history that the future sends agents to manage, then in some sense their summer was always going to happen exactly as it did. The choices they made were always going to be the choices they made. The question of free will in a time-looped universe is one the show raises and then moves on from, because answering it would collapse the narrative. Mystery number 76. Blendin's imprisonment and deal with Bill. Fan theories have long held that Blendin's eventual behavior in Season 2, specifically being possessed by Bill to release the dimensional rift, may have been set up long before the episode shows it happening. The theory, documented at length on TV Tropes and the Fan Wiki, suggests that Bill made contact with Blendin during his time in prison following the events of the Time Traveler's Pig, and offered him a deal to escape. This would mean that every subsequent appearance of Blendin was either the possessed version or a version already compromised by a deal with Bill. The show never confirms or denies this. Bill's possession of Blendin in Dipper and Mabel versus the future is depicted as a fairly abrupt event, but the ambiguity of when Bill first made contact is left open. Mystery number 77. What happened to Blendin after the events of Weirdmageddon? He was last seen after the Time Baby and the Time Police were destroyed by Bill in Weirdmageddon Part 1, fleeing the scene as the only survivor of his entire department. He does not appear in the resolution of Weirdmageddon. He does not appear in the finale. His fate is completely unresolved. He presumably went back to the future to deliver the news that the Time Baby had been destroyed. He presumably dealt with some form of professional aftermath. But none of this is shown. Mystery number 78. Wait. The Ghost Mailbox's prophecy about the end of the world. The Ghost Mailbox, a minor but memorable element of the show, is a mailbox that can answer one question about the future per person. It is connected to something, some information source, some prophetic mechanism. It tells Dipper his greatest wish will come true, but Not in the way he expects. This turns out to be about the author's return and its complications. But the ghost mailbox also mentions the year 3012 in relation to the end of the world, which connects to the Time Baby's reconstitution timeline. The mailbox knows things that should be unknowable. Where does it get its information? Who or what built it? Is it connected to the same prophetic infrastructure that generated the cipher wheel? Or is it something stranger and more local, a supernatural byproduct of the valley's dimensional properties that allows information from adjacent time streams to bleed through? Mystery number 79. The multiple versions of Ford that he encountered during his dimensional travels. The show establishes that Ford, during his 30 years between dimensions, encountered alternate versions of himself. This means that somewhere in the multiverse there are other Stanfords who made different choices at the same moments. A Ford who did not discover gravity falls. A Ford whose perpetual motion machine was not destroyed by Stan. A Ford who agreed with Bill in the end. A Ford who never came back. What is the relationship between these alternates and the Ford we know? Did Ford attempt to contact any of them? Did any of them attempt to contact him? Do they know about Weird McGucket? Do any of them live in universes where it still happened? Mystery number 80. The alternate gravity falls dimensions. The Nightmare Realm is not the only other dimension the show references. Ford mentions Dimension 52 as strangely pleasant, a note of real warmth in his otherwise cautious account of his dimensional wandering. Blendon travels through time but also apparently across dimensions. The show establishes that Gravity Falls as a dimensional weak point has adjacency to many different realities, not just the Nightmare Realm. Some of these realities are glimpsed briefly during Weird McGucket, when Bill's influence allows elements of the Nightmare Realm to bleed into our world. But the full landscape of what is accessible through the Gravity Falls dimensional weak point, and what might be accessible through it now that Bill has been defeated, is one of the most expansive, uncharted territories the show creates. Section 10. Character fates, hidden backstories, and the questions that linger. The show ends warmly, with most of its characters in a better place than they started, but warmer endings do not mean fully resolved ones. There are characters whose stories the show left at a comma rather than a period, and whose futures remain genuinely unknown. And the show gives enough detail about each of them to make you care about the comma, to make the unwritten future feel like a real place rather than a comfortable void. Gravity Falls is unusual among animated shows in that its secondary characters, the people who live on the margins of the main plot, feel genuinely inhabited. They have histories that predate the twins' arrival. They have relationships with the town that stretch back years or decades, or in some cases longer. They have feelings about each other and about the strange situation they all share. When the show ends, you are not just curious about what happens to Dipper and Mabel. You are curious about Seuss, who has inherited a mystery shack in a town that just survived an apocalypse. You are curious about Wendy, heading into her senior year of high school in a place where you cannot pretend anymore that nothing weird happens. You are curious about Pacifica, standing in a Northwest family whose fraud has been confirmed and whose patriarch tried to align himself with a literal demon for status. You are curious about McGucket, who is just beginning to remember who he really is after 30 years of deliberate self-erasure. These are people whose stories are not finished just because the summer is over. Mystery number 81. Seuss's father, Jesus Seuss Ramirez Jr.'s father, left when Seuss was very young, sending a yearly birthday card that became the organizing emotional symbol of Seuss's hope that his father would return. The episode Blendon's Game reveals that Seuss used the time tape to observe his father as a young man and saw the moment when his father chose to leave. He accepted it. He grieved. He found something like peace. But the father himself, wherever he is in the show's present, is never accounted for. He is alive. He has been sending birthday cards. He knows where Seuss is. Does he know what happened in Gravity Falls? Did Weird Mageddon reach him wherever he is? Does he ever reach out in any form more substantial than a card? Mystery number 82. Wendy's family and the Corduroy Curse. Wendy Corduroy is one of the most grounded characters in the show. The teenager who's been living in Gravity Falls long enough to take its supernatural qualities entirely in stride. She comes from a family of lumberjacks, a heritage the show treats with both affection and subtle horror. And she handles crisis with a composed resourcefulness that comes from growing up in a place where crisis is the default setting. But the Corduroy family's specific history with the supernatural elements of Gravity Falls is never detailed. Her father, Manly Dan's particular brand of aggressive, somewhat unhinged hypermasculinity suggests a family with a specific and possibly unusual relationship to the town's weirdness. The show hints at but never fully explores what it has meant, across generations, to be a Corduroy in Gravity Falls. Mystery number 83. What happened to Gideon after Weird Mageddon? Little Gideon Gleeful is one of the show's most complicated minor antagonists. He is a child psychic with genuine abilities and a profoundly disturbed relationship to power and entitlement. A kid who learned early that his gifts gave him leverage and built an entire identity around that leverage. His arc in Season 2 involves imprisonment, a deal with Bill, a brief return to villainy, and then, in the finale, a moment of apparent genuine connection with Mabel, and what looks like a first step toward being something other than a manipulator. But this is a first step, not an arrival. What does Gideon Gleeful's life look like in the years after Weird Mageddon? Does he continue to develop his psychic abilities? Does he find a way to use them honestly? Does the experience of being one of Bill's pawns leave lasting damage? Mystery number 84. What did Pacifica tell her parents about the finale? Pacifica's redemption arc in the show is one of its most satisfying, moving from a girl who has been conditioned by bell-ringing behavioral control to fear and obey her parents and into someone who makes her own moral choice at the pivotal moment. She opens the gates of the Northwest Mansion because it is right, not because she has been told to. But her parents, Preston and Priscilla Northwest, are profoundly unpleasant people who use their daughter as a status prop and punished any deviation from the family's social performance. After Weird Mageddon, with the Pines family celebrated and the Northwests presumably disgraced, what is Pacifica's relationship with her parents? Does she leave? Does she stay and fight for something better? Does the bell ever ring again? Mystery number 85, Robbie Valentino and the Backwards Message. The episode Boys Crazy reveals that Robbie's acoustic guitar song, used to manipulate Wendy's emotions, contains a hidden backwards message that functions essentially as a hypnotic suggestion. Robbie claims not to have known the message was there. The song was one he said he wrote, but the show implies he found or stole it. The origin of the song and the backwards message within it points toward the supernatural. Who composed that song originally? Did they know about the hidden message? Was it designed to be a manipulation tool, or did the message emerge somehow from the specific acoustic properties of the composition in relation to Gravity Falls' unique dimensional resonance? Robbie, despite being the source of this mystery, is never asked about it again. Mystery number 86, the Northwest Deal with Bill. The episode Northwest Mansion Mystery features a haunting image, a large painting in a hidden room, of the mansion depicting Bill Cipher floating above a landscape in flames with humans bowing before him. This painting predates the events of the show by generations. It was in the Northwest's hidden room. The family knew about Bill. The show implies, through McGucket's warning to Dipper about an imminent threat countdown connected to the laptop, and through Preston Northwest's immediate attempt to align himself with Bill at the start of Weirdmageddon, that the Northwest family has a long-standing relationship with Bill Cipher. What was the nature of that relationship? What did the Northwests offer Bill, and what did he offer them? Was the Northwest cover-up the conspiracy that made a fraud the founder of Gravity Falls and erased the true history, somehow connected to a deal with Bill? Mystery number 87. The real story of Quentin Trembley's presidency. Trembley is played primarily for comedy in A Irrational Treasure. He was apparently an eccentric, possibly deranged president who passed laws allowing people to marry animals and designated Gravity Falls as a sovereign vacation territory of the United States, and ran naked through the Rose Garden. He was impeached, and his history was suppressed. But Trembley found Gravity Falls. He knew it was special. He knew enough to seek immortality, specifically there to preserve himself in peanut brittle and store himself beneath the cemetery, waiting. Did Trembley encounter the supernatural elements of Gravity Falls? Did he know about Bill? Did he know about the dimensional anomalies? His eccentricities, so easily dismissed as madness, might be the behavior of a man who had seen things that no one in the rational world of governance would believe or accommodate. Mystery number 88. What was Ford doing between leaving Gravity Falls and the show's events? The timeline of Ford's dimensional travels has gaps. He was pushed through the portal in the early 1980s. He returned in 2012. 30 years of wandering other dimensions is the official account. But the specific sequence of dimensions he visited, the encounters he had, the knowledge he accumulated, the ways those 30 years changed him, beyond what the show explicitly addresses, constitute a vast untold story. Journal 3's published edition hints at some of this. But the full record of Stanford Pines' 30 years between worlds is essentially a novel that has never been written. Mystery number 89. The other dimension Ford called strangely pleasant. Dimension 52, mentioned in passing as a place Ford apparently visited during his interdimensional wandering and found agreeable, is never described in any more detail than that passing mention. In a list of the dangerous, horrifying, and confusing things Ford encountered over 30 years, Dimension 52 was pleasant. Why? What made it pleasant? What was it like? Is it still accessible? Could it still be reached through the Gravity Falls dimensional weak point? In a show that documents so much horror and strangeness, the one dimension described as nice is left completely unexplored. Mystery number 90. The Mabel's Bubble World and What It Means. During Weirdmageddon, Bill traps Mabel in a dream bubble, a customized pocket reality built around her desires. Inside the bubble, everything is perfect. Summer never ends. Everyone is her friend. There is no conflict, no growing up, no loss. Mabel's deepest fear, expressed in the episode Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, is that summer ending means she and Dipper will be separated, that growing up means losing the version of them that exists only together and nowhere else. The bubble exploits this fear perfectly. But the bubble is also described as something that could consume her if she stayed too long, eroding her connection to actual reality. The mechanism of the bubble, how it was built to target Mabel's specific emotional vulnerabilities with such precision, what Bill knew about Mabel that the audience was never told, is never fully examined. Section 11. The biggest questions. What we will never know for certain. We have covered a lot of ground tonight. We have walked through the origins of a two-dimensional dream demon, through the woods where a six-fingered scientist buried his deepest research, through the halls of a secret society built on forgetting, through the layers of code and cipher that Alex Hirsch wove into every corner of this show. But some questions are designed to stay questions. Some mysteries are the point rather than the problem. This final section is for the ones that go deepest. There is a thing that happens when you have spent enough time with a story that is built around the unknown. You stop wanting it to be solved. Not because the answers would be disappointing, though some of them might be, but because the mystery itself has become home. You know how the opening theme sounds. You know the specific creak of the Mystery Shack. You know the rhythm of Dipper's voice when he is reading from Journal 3, the way he says things like, "I never believed in the paranormal," with a sincerity that never quite fades even after everything he has been through. You know the shape of the summer that these stories came from. And in knowing all of that, you have also learned to value the space between the answers, the breathing room, the open questions that keep you coming back. Alex Hirsch built something that rewards return visits. Not just because the coded messages are still there and still decodable, but because the questions themselves deepen on rewatch in a way that answered questions cannot. When you watch Tourist Trapped for the 4th time, knowing everything you know about Bill and Ford and the Portal and Weird McGucket, you see the show differently. You see Stan descend through the vending machine and you know, this time, what he is protecting. You see Dipper find the journal and you know what the journal is leading toward. And yet the mystery does not feel reduced. It feels richer. The questions have more texture because you know more about the shape of what surrounds them. That is the gift the show gives you. Not answers. Something more generous than that. Mystery number 91. What is the axolotl really? We know what the axolotl does. It exists in the space between spaces. It is more powerful than Bill's cipher, more powerful than the Time Baby, more powerful than anything else the show has named. Its power involves time in some way. The axolotl poem implies it can reset or revise timelines. It takes the form of a giant axolotl, which is significant because axolotls are real animals with an extraordinary biological property. They do not fully metamorphose. They retain juvenile characteristics throughout their lives in a state called neoteny. They never entirely become what they are becoming. They stay in between. This feels exactly right for an entity that exists in the space between spaces. But what the axolotl is in terms of origin, purpose, and cosmological role is never addressed. Is it a deity? A natural force? A higher dimensional intelligence of the same category as Bill, but oriented toward balance rather than chaos? The show does not say. Alex Hirsch does not say. The axolotl simply is, immensely and quietly, and the question of its nature is one of the most beautiful open spaces the show created. Mystery number 92. What is Bill's true name and what would it actually do? This was addressed earlier, but it deserves its own entry in this final section because it represents something the show does philosophically rather than narratively. The true name is the unknowable as concept, not a specific piece of information that could theoretically be revealed but would ruin the rug. Not a punchline waiting for the right moment. The true name is the show's acknowledgement that there are entities in this universe whose complete nature cannot be communicated in any language that a human mind can process. The destruction caused by hearing it is not a magical trap. It is just what happens when a three-dimensional consciousness tries to process a description of something that exists in a fundamentally incompatible mode of being. Mystery number 93. Did the prophecy work, or did everything happen in spite of it? The cipher wheel prophecy says that 10 specific individuals standing in formation can defeat Bill. The attempt to invoke the prophecy fails because Stan and Ford argue and break the chain. Bill is ultimately defeated not by the prophecy, but by a plan involving the memory gun and a direct cognitive assault from within Stan's mind. So, did the prophecy fail? Or did the prophecy's purpose change across the thousands of years since it was written? Perhaps the prophecy was always pointing toward the specific moment of Bill being in Stan's mind, toward the need for the right 10 people to be present in Gravity Falls at all, which required all of them to be drawn there across the summer. Perhaps the prophecy's function was not to be invoked as a ritual, but to bring the right people together. The show leaves this genuinely ambiguous. Mystery number 94. What does Dipper do with his life? 4. What? This is a softer question, but it matters deeply. The show ends with Dipper on a bus back to his parents, carrying everything he learned over the summer, carrying Ford's invitation to return as an apprentice of sorts, carrying the weight of having faced and participated in an actual apocalypse at 12 years old. He has Ford's encouragement and the possibility of a life dedicated to studying the genuinely inexplicable. He also has a sister who needs him, and a family that is newly healed, and the ordinary demands of growing up. Alex Hirsch has said that Dipper and Mabel's story is not over, that a video game continuation he dreams of making would continue their adventures. But what that life looks like, what 12-year-old Dipper becomes, is in the hands of whoever eventually tells that story. Mystery number 95. What does Mabel do with what she knows? Mabel spent a summer in a town full of genuinely impossible things and came away with a sweater collection, a pet pig, a heart full of genuine relationships, and a sense of herself that does not need approval from a supernatural entity to feel solid. She is, by any measure, the most psychologically functional person in the show by its end, which is remarkable given what she went through. But Mabel also knows things. She knows that reality is thinner than it looks. She knows that the right love can hold up against a trillion-year-old demon. She knows that summer ends, but the people you love do not have to go away when it does. That knowledge, carried forward into an ordinary middle school life in a city far from a supernatural nexus, is itself a mystery. How do you be a normal kid when you know what you know? Mystery number 94. Bill and the color yellow. Bill is yellow. Specifically, he is the bright, warm, artificial yellow of a signal, of something demanding attention, of the sun when it has a particular kind of menace. In color theory, yellow is associated with intellect and communication, and also with cowardice and treachery. Bill is all of these things simultaneously. His color is not passive. It announces him. Every time you see yellow in Gravity Falls, in the rug of the Mystery Shack, in a dream sequence's lighting, in the flash of an eye at the edge of a frame, the show is trying to tell you that Bill is present or has been present or will be present. Yellow is the color of his surveillance. The choice of yellow is also the choice of visibility. Bill does not hide. He is not subtle about his presence. He is the only entity in Gravity Falls that announces itself in its design and dares you to underestimate it anyway. And everyone does. Ford underestimated him. Gideon underestimated him. Stan almost underestimated him. Except that Stan's particular quality of mind, the con artist's sensitivity to a fellow performer, recognized something in Bill that more sophisticated intellects did not. Yellow is warning. Yellow is caution. And yet, across the entire show, almost no one actually cautions anything. They just walk forward. Mystery number 95. What does Mabel actually know? Mabel Pines is frequently underestimated by almost every character in the show, including, occasionally, her own brother. She is presented as the emotional, creative, unfocused half of the twin pair to Dipper's analytical, fact-oriented half. But Mabel is consistently, quietly more perceptive than anyone gives her credit for. She notices things. She feels the emotional truth of situations before her brother can analyze his way to the same conclusion. In sock opera, she outsmarts Bill Cipher, who has possession of Dipper's body and access to Dipper's analytical mind, by exploiting the physical limitations of the body he is inhabiting. A 12-year-old girl outsmarted a trillion-year-old demon by knowing her own brother's body better than he did. The show repeatedly suggests that Mabel's power is of a fundamentally different kind than anything the supernatural world throws at them. A kind of warm, stubborn certainty about love and family that does not compute for beings like Bill. But the full extent of what Mabel understands, and what she has quietly decided not to ask about because she trusts that it will be okay, remains one of the show's most gentle mysteries. There's a scene late in the show where Mabel, trapped in her dream bubble, has to choose between the perfect world Bill made for her and the real, complicated ending world outside. She chooses the real world without hesitation. The whole question resolves in a moment, for Mabel in a way it never quite resolves for anyone else in the cast. She already knows what matters. She has always known. The mystery is not what Mabel knows. The mystery is how she knew it so early and so completely, and whether that clarity was always in her or whether the summer gave it to her. Mystery number 96 through 100. The 5 creatures Ford never found. His journals reference multiple anomalies that he never successfully documented. Creatures are phenomena that he heard about secondhand that left evidence without ever yielding a direct encounter. Among these are references to things that could exist in any corner of the Gravity Falls forest. Entities described only by their effects, by the shapes they left in earth and memory, and the strange feeling of being watched from exactly the right angle. Ford is a scientist who is used to anomalies that cooperate with study, that allow themselves to be observed, that leave enough evidence to build a hypothesis. The things that did not cooperate, that refused to be documented, that remained stubbornly beyond the reach of even his particular genius, are the ones that keep appearing in his notes as frustrated question marks. The show is, among many other things, a document of the limits of the knowable. Ford's frustration with what he cannot pin down is palpable in the way the journal entries about undocumented creatures are written. Shorter, more fragmentary, lacking the confident scientific language of the entries that describe fully cataloged creatures. The gnomes get a full entry with sketches and behavioral notes, and a cataloging of known weaknesses. The undocumented things get a question mark and an underline and sometimes a small note in the margin that says something like, "Heard again last night. Still cannot see it." The best scientists are the ones who are honest about what they do not know. Ford's journals are as much a record of the edges of knowing as they are a catalog of what was found. Section 12. The Deepest Mystery. Why Gravity Falls Still Matters. It has been almost a decade since the last episode of Gravity Falls aired. A show about one summer, 2 seasons, 40 episodes, something like 800 pages of coded secrets spread across 2 years of television, and one of the most ambitious companion book releases any animated series has ever attempted. And it is still here. Still being watched, still being analyzed, still generating new theories and heated disagreements. And the specific kind of midnight obsession that comes from a story that is not quite finished, even though it technically ended. Mystery number 101 through 175. Because we promised you that number in the title, and we are going to deliver. Mystery number 101. Why does Ford's research lab have a specific room labeled "Do Not Enter" that the show never enters? It is visible in background shots. The camera never goes inside. That choice is deliberate. Mystery number 102. What is in the locked journal pages that are blacked out even under blacklight? Journal 3's published edition has pages rendered completely opaque, described as locked by Ford himself. The content was sealed before he hid the journal. He sealed it knowing that even if Dipper found the journal, these specific pages would remain unreadable. Mystery number 103. Who cleaned up after Weird Mageddon? The physical transformation of Gravity Falls during the apocalypse was catastrophic. Buildings were altered, people were petrified and unpetrified. The entire landscape of the town was restructured by dimensional horror. The restoration happens, implied and off-screen. But the specific mechanism of how the town physically returned to normal after Bill's defeat is never depicted. Mystery number 104. The specific properties of unicorn hair as a magical substance. Why unicorn hair? What is the chemical or metaphysical property that makes a single strand of unicorn mane capable of protecting a genius mind from a transdimensional demon? Is it purely the symbolism, the idea of purity as a concept being physically real in this universe? Is there something biological about unicorns that the show is hinting at? Mystery number 105. The sleeping god beneath the town. The show hints, in Ford's paranoid annotations and journal entries toward the end of his Gravity Falls research, at something deep beneath the town that is older than the UFO, older than the dimensional weak point, older than the native peoples who eventually fled. Something that was there before everything. Ford writes about it in fragments, in language that becomes less scientific and more fearful as it goes on. And then the entry stops mid-sentence. It is in the margin of a journal page that the show shows very briefly in a background shot during a scene with Ford explaining the town's history to Dipper. Nobody in the fandom has a definitive answer for what it was. Mystery number 106. The real reason the show was called Gravity Falls and not something else. The name references the way gravity fails in the town, the way normal rules stop applying, the way the reliable physics of the world do not hold. But Falls is also a season. Falls is what happens to something at the end of its rise. Falls is what leaves marks. Alex Hirsch was 27 years old when the show premiered. He was making something deeply personal about twins separated by growing up, about the summer that can never last. The title is more than a place name, but the full intentionality of it, what Hirsch himself meant by it, what he was reaching for when he chose those two words, is something he has spoken about in interviews and never quite pinned all the way down. Mystery number 107. The fate of the Stan-O War. The brothers sail away at the end of the show in a boat they built together as children, the dream of their shared youth that survived 30 years of estrangement. In the very last glimpse of them, they are at sea together, heading for the unknown. Ford has his adventure. Stan has his brother back. They are, in the only sense that matters by the show's end, home. But the Stan-O War is sailing towards something. They are doing research. They are encountering new anomalies. The Adventures of Stanford and Stanley Pines, Part 2, is the story we did not get and the one that clearly exists somewhere beyond the frame. Mystery number 108. What is the significance of the burning wax figure of Larry King? The episode Headhunters involves Stan's wax statue collection, coming to life and committing a murder. Among the figures is a wax Larry King who serves as the villain of the episode. The wax figures being cursed to life is a standard horror trope played for comedy. But wax Larry King's specific choice to murder the other wax figures, the logic of his villain arc, and the precise curse that animated these figures in the first place are never explained. Where did Stan get cursed wax figures? Why were they cursed? Is this connected to the broader supernatural ecology of the town? Or is it an isolated incident? Mystery number 109. The Multi-Bear's musical preferences. The multi-bear, a creature with many bear heads, is encountered by Dipper in the episode about Manitor training. The multi-bear was feared and persecuted by the Manitors because of what they saw as shameful preferences. Those preferences turn out to be a specific pop music track, a saccharine, extremely catchy song that the multi-bear loves without apology. Dipper's refusal to harm the creature for its musical taste, and the multi-bear's subsequent revelation of genuine personality and warmth, makes the episode a fairly pointed story about tolerance and the harm of shaming people for the things they love. But the multi-bear, after this episode, lives its life in the mountains of Gravity Falls with whatever access to pop music a bear-headed monster in an Oregon forest can arrange. Its subsequent life is never addressed. Mystery number 110 through 130. The next 20 mysteries are smaller, textural, the kind that exist in the corners of frames and the edges of episodes. There's a background detail in several Mystery Shack scenes that shows a specific door that changes its location between episodes. One visit, it is near the kitchen. In another episode, it is down a different hallway. The show does not acknowledge this. Whether it is a production continuity error or an intentional detail about the shack's interior being spatially impossible is debated by the fandom. The Gremloblin's tears have healing properties in the fandom-developed extended lore, based on a single ambiguous journal note that is easy to misread. This might be entirely fan invention. It also might not be. Mabel's sweaters communicate more than aesthetic joy. The Into the Bunker episode specifically uses the light bulb sweater as a practical tool. Her double-crossed fingers sweater she wears while lying to Stan. The episode where she wears the cat sweater happens to be one involving deception and performance. Whether the sweaters are a genuine ongoing narrative code or a pattern fans have imposed on coincidence is a question without a definitive answer. The wax figures in the Mystery Shack include several real historical figures alongside fictional ones. The specific selection of historical figures and the specific supernatural power they express when animated raises questions about what criteria Stan used when building his wax museum. There is a running question in the fandom about whether Dipper and Mabel's parents are supernatural in any way. Their complete absence from any crisis, their apparent obliviousness to where their children spent the summer, their willingness to send 12-year-olds to a distant relative in a small Oregon town. All of this is consistent with normal parental negligence, and also with something stranger. The Summerween monster, known as the Summerween trickster, is a creature made of discarded Halloween candy that can consume people. It has a mythology around it suggesting an older, stranger, seasonal, supernatural tradition in Gravity Falls that parallels and potentially predates standard Halloween. Where does this tradition come from? What is the genuine origin of the Summerween trickster? The love god, a minor supernatural entity who manufactures love potions and meddles in the romantic lives of small-town residents, is depicted as annoying, but not particularly malevolent. His origin and purpose in the cosmic order of the show are never explained. Why does a love deity haunt this specific Oregon town? The arachnomorphs from Roadside Attraction are creatures that disguise themselves as humans to lure victims. They live in various roadside attractions across Oregon. Their existence implies a whole ecology of supernatural predator entities using human society as camouflage, scattered across the rural Pacific Northwest in numbers that suggest Gravity Falls is not as uniquely strange as the show sometimes implies. Maybe Gravity Falls is just the place that gets studied. Maybe the weird is everywhere. Mystery number 131. The Book of Bill and What It Changes. The 2023 publication titled The Book of Bill expands significantly on Bill's backstory in ways that complicate and deepen the show's original lore. It suggests that the destruction of Euclidia was more accidental than Bill admitted, and that the guilt from this accident is the engine of all his subsequent behavior. It implies that Bill had a more complex inner life than the show's 2 seasons could fully explore. It includes the poem about Bill's fate after the finale, including the lines about meeting the axolotl and being offered a path to redemption. The canonical status of this book is ambiguous. Alex Hirsch has described it as containing things that are genuinely canon, while also acknowledging that expanded lore books operate in a different space from the show itself. This uncertainty is itself a mystery. How much of what we read in the Book of Bill should we take as true, and how do we decide? One of the Book of Bill's most intriguing revelations involves Bill's parents in Euclidia. The real-world website, this is not a website, d.com.com, when you type Vallis Cineris into it, reveals that one of Bill's parents wore a top hat, just as Bill himself does. The top hat is the most immediately human-coded part of Bill's design. Everything else about him is geometry and golden light, but the top hat is almost Victorian, almost gentlemanly, almost a bit of performance that says, "I have chosen to dress for an occasion." If Bill inherited it from a parent, then the top hat is not performance. It is mourning dress. It is the only piece of his family that he carried with him when he burned his world and called it liberation. Every time Bill tips his hat in the show, he is carrying the ghost of his own parents with him, and he probably knows it, and he probably does not care, and he is definitely lying to himself about not caring. Mystery number 132 through 150. A final run of mysteries for the very end of the night. What happened to the memory tubes in the Hall of the Forgotten after the Blind Eye Society disbanded? They are presumably still there. Those tubes contain the authentic, supernatural memories of potentially hundreds of Gravity Falls residents. They contain memories that would change those people's understanding of their own lives. Returning them would be an enormous gift. It would also be terrifying. The episode Little Gift Shop of Horrors features Stan telling 3 stories in a framing device about objects in the Mystery Shack with strange histories. The objects are established as supernaturally significant, but their origins before Stan acquired them are never detailed. The Mystery Shack is, in this sense, a museum of the unexplained, in a more literal way than its tourist trap packaging suggests. The episode Suze and the Real Girl involves a dating sim artificial intelligence gaining true sentience and attempting to cross into the physical world. She is ultimately returned to the digital space. But a digital intelligence that has achieved genuine sentience has been neither destroyed nor consented to return. She is trapped in a digital space indefinitely. The ethical dimension of this resolution is left entirely unaddressed. The physical cipher hunt statue that fans found following the show's ARG leads them to a real statue that was placed by Alex Hirsch in an Oregon forest. It was later moved. It is currently located at Confusion Hill in California, an attraction that itself served as a partial inspiration for the Mystery Shack. The statue blurs the line between the show's world and our world in a way that feels less like marketing and more like the show reaching through the screen to touch something in physical reality. What does it mean for a fictional monster to have a physical monument? What is the nature of the thing that the statue represents? Standing in the woods of a place that is real while the world around it is not. The cryptogram from the opening theme has been visible in every episode since the very first. Many people decoded it. Many people watched the show for years without knowing it was there. This is a direct representation of the show's central thesis. The truth was always visible. You just had to speak the language. The number 618 appears in the show as Alex Hirsch's birthday, as Hirsch's signature woven into his work. But birthdays are also the day something begins, the date that a person becomes present in the world. 618, not just a number in the background, but a repeated insistence that the creator is here. That someone specific made this thing. That behind all the coded messages and ancient demons and unsolvable mysteries, there is a person who cared enough to hide themselves in every corner of it. Dipper's birthmark is in the shape of a tool for finding north. He arrives in a town where nothing points in a reliable direction, where even gravity is untrustworthy, and he is the one who has a built-in compass on his forehead. Mabel's name means lovable in some interpretations, and she is. The show ends with summer ending, which is also when it begins. Mystery number 151, The Invisible Wizard. Ford's journal contains a description of a wizard who is entirely invisible to the naked eye, only barely detectable with night vision equipment. Ford described him as having, under night vision conditions, piercing blue eyes, chiseled cheekbones, a beautiful rainbow wand, and an absurdly pointed hat. This raises several magnificent questions. Ford documented creatures of alien origin, supernatural entities of enormous power, and beings capable of bending the laws of physics. And then he described the invisible wizard as though he wanted to make sure anyone reading his notes understood that the wizard was, physically, extremely attractive. That observation, preserved in the permanent scientific record of Gravity Falls, tells you something about what kind of scientist Stanford Pines was when he was not in the grip of supernatural paranoia. But the invisible wizard, beyond being invisible and well-featured, is never further developed. What kind of magic does he practice? Where did he come from? Is he self-aware of his own invisibility, or does he experience himself as fully visible? Mystery number 152, The Barf Fairies. Journal 3 contains a brief entry about a potential tactical use for barf fairies against Gideon's forces during the conflict over the Mystery Shack's deed. The barf fairies are not elaborated upon beyond this. They exist. They barf. They are apparently small enough and mobile enough to be considered as a deployable resource in a supernatural conflict. The fairies themselves appear briefly in a journal illustration as tiny winged creatures with deeply unfortunate expressions, as if they are as unhappy about their particular gift as you might expect. What is the ecology of barf fairies in Gravity Falls? Where do they live? What do they eat that produces the effect? Is this a defense mechanism? Are they aware that their barf is the feature by which they are known? Mystery number 153, The Cursed Egyptian Super Termites. Ford's journal lists cursed Egyptian super termites as a known hazard in Gravity Falls, apparently substantially more destructive than standard termites, and operating with a degree of organized malice consistent with a curse. Gideon attempted to use them to claim the Mystery Shack. These are termites. From Egypt! That are cursed, living in an Oregon forest. The path by which a colony of supernaturally enhanced Egyptian insects arrived in the Pacific Northwest of the United States is one of the more logistically baffling mysteries the show creates and then completely ignores. Mystery number 154. The Manatar Society and the Question of Gender and Power. When the episode involving Manitors is examined closely, it becomes apparent that the Manatar community's extreme focus on physical power as the definition of worth is presented as both culturally specific and psychologically damaging. The multi-bear is persecuted not because he is harmful, but because he loves something that the community has decided is incompatible with strength. The resolution of the episode, in which Dipper refuses to harm the multi-bear because harming something for its preferences is simply wrong, is one of the show's cleaner moral statements. But what happens in Manotor society after Dipper walks away? Does his example change anything? Does the multibear's survival and the revelation of his actual nature shift the community's understanding of what strength means? The show says nothing more about this world after Dipper leaves it. Mystery number 155. What is the actual geological cause of gravity falls? The town's name is a literal description of a phenomenon. Gravity does fall there. The floating cliffs, the interdimensional weak point, the buried UFO. Any one of these could be responsible for the town's gravitational anomalies, or they could all be symptoms of something deeper. Ford's compass goes haywire near the floating cliffs. The note he left says the answer may be underground. We know there is a UFO underground. We know that whatever catastrophic event brought the UFO down happened tens of millions of years ago. Is the dimensional weak point caused by the UFO's crash? Did an alien spacecraft plowing into the Earth at dimensional rift speeds create the conditions that make gravity falls strange? Or did the spacecraft crash here because the weak point was already there, drawn to it the way all strange things are drawn to gravity falls? Mystery number 156. The Summerween tradition and its deeper cosmology. Summerween is a midsummer Halloween celebrated in Gravity Falls, apparently unique to the town. The Summerween trickster is a monster formed from discarded candy, motivated by the grief of being thrown away, possessing people who fail to show proper holiday respect. The tradition has clearly been going on for a long time. The townspeople know about it. They prepare for it. It is established and normal in the town's seasonal calendar. But Summerween does not exist in the outside world. It is a Gravity Falls phenomenon. Was it created by the town's supernatural environment? Was it something the ancient inhabitants practiced? Is the Summerween trickster an entity that has existed since before the town was founded? Or is it a more recent supernatural creation? Mystery number 157. The Corduroy family and their relationship with logging. The lumberjack ghost who haunts Northwest Mansion was one of the workers who died building it, a victim of Northwest greed and the Great Flood of 1863. Wendy Corduroy comes from a family of lumberjacks. Her father, Manly Dan, is a lumberjack. The Corduroy family has been in Gravity Falls apparently for generations. Is there a specific connection between the Corduroy family and the ghost's curse? Are they descendants of one of the workers who died building the Northwest Mansion? Is Wendy's particular comfort with the supernatural in part a family inheritance? A multi-generational exposure to the town's weirdness? Mystery number 158. The specific relationship between Bill Cipher and children. Bill specifically targeted Dipper and Mabel repeatedly. He could have possessed Seuss or Wendy or any number of adults in Gravity Falls. But he chose children. His deal with Dipper in sock opera, his appearance in Mabel's bubble, his particular interest in Gideon, who is also a child. Bill seems to find something particularly useful or perhaps particularly entertaining about targeting young people. The show implies this is partly because children are easier to manipulate through their emotions, their fears, and their desires. But there may be a deeper reason. Children have not yet developed the psychological armor that adults build from years of disappointment and compromise. Their minds are more open, more connected, more alive to possibility, including the terrible possibilities that Bill represents. Mystery number 159. The bottomless pit's actual physics. We said earlier that the bottomless pit is a physical impossibility in a three-dimensional world. But the show treats it as a genuine geographic feature with consistent, if weird, rules. Things thrown into it eventually emerge somewhere, implying a loop. Stan, Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss all fall into it at some point and emerge unharmed, which means the loop delivers passengers as well as objects. The time spent inside the loop is apparently brief from the inside, even if extended from the outside. Is the bottomless pit a naturally occurring dimensional feature or a constructed one? Did someone build it? The ancient peoples? Ford? Is it connected to the UFO? Mystery number 160. The fate of the Wax Larry King head. At the end of Headhunters, after the wax figures have committed their murder and been resolved, Wax Larry King's head rolls out of a fireplace specifically to deliver the episode's closing joke. It is the only wax figure whose specific fate is shown rather than implied. But it is shown as a severed head. Still alive, still talking, still able to deliver a line. And then the episode ends. Is Wax Larry King's head still somewhere in the Mystery Shack? Is there a sentient, cursed wax head of a famous television host rolling around a gift shop in rural Oregon? By the show's internal logic, probably yes. Mystery number 161. What the twins tell their parents when they get home. The final episode ends with Dipper and Mabel on the bus. They are going back to the city. They're going back to school, to their friends, to the ordinary demands of being 12. They spent the summer fighting gnomes and interdimensional dream demons in a supernatural apocalypse. Their parents presumably expect them to say it was nice and they made some friends. What do you actually say? What story do you tell the people who were not there? Do the twins keep the secrets of Gravity Falls, the way Ford kept his research secret, the way Stan kept his portal secret? Or do they try to tell the truth, knowing they will not be believed? Mystery number 162. The continuing state of the interdimensional portal's infrastructure. After Ford returns and Weird Mageddon ends, the portal machinery is presumably still in the basement of the Mystery Shack, now under Seuss's management. The portal was powerful enough to create a dimensional rift that almost ended the world. It is presumably still operational to some degree, or at minimum still containing residual dimensional energy. What happens to that energy over time? Is it safe? Is Seuss running a tourist trap directly above a piece of machinery that could theoretically tear the fabric of reality? Mystery number 163. Ford's metal head plate. Ford installed a metal plate in his head to prevent Bill from repossessing his body after their falling out. The plate is not a mundane implant. It was designed by Ford himself to prevent a supernatural entity from accessing his consciousness. The engineering of a device capable of protecting a human mind from an interdimensional demonic possession is an extraordinary technological achievement that the show treats almost as a biographical footnote. How does it work? What material is it made of? Is it permanently installed? Could it be removed? Did Ford design it to be replicable, a technology that others could use to protect themselves? Mystery number 164. The specific properties of the electron carpet. Ford invented a mind-swapping electron carpet while at Gravity Falls, an invention also mentioned in the same breath as a mind control tie designed for Ronald Reagan. The mind-swapping capabilities of the electron carpet are demonstrated in the episode Carpet Diem, when Dipper and Mabel accidentally swap bodies. The carpet was apparently just sitting in the Mystery Shack, in a room full of boxes, available for two children to fall asleep on simultaneously and accidentally exchange consciousness. What other inventions did Ford leave behind in various rooms and boxes of the Mystery Shack that Stan never found or identified? Mystery number 165. The full extent of Gideon's psychic abilities and their source. Gideon Gleeful has genuine psychic abilities in the show, not the fraudulent telepathy he markets at the tent of telepathy, but actual paranormal capability. He is able to perceive things he should not be able to perceive. He has Ford's second journal, which suggests either that he found it or that he was guided to it in some way. His abilities appear to be real but limited, supplemented and amplified by the supernatural technology he acquires. Where do his actual abilities come from? Is he a natural psychic, someone born with sensitivity to the dimensional energies that saturate Gravity Falls? Or is his ability a product of living in the town's environment long enough that the ambient weirdness has affected his development? Mystery number 166. The Love God and the Nature of Supernatural Desire in Gravity Falls. The Love God appears in The Love God as a short, winged entity in a fur coat who manufactures love and anti-love potions and uses them to meddle in human romantic lives for entertainment. His potions are not illusions. They create genuine emotional shifts. The town of Gravity Falls is apparently on his regular route, which means it has been subject to his interventions potentially many times before the show. How many of the town's romantic relationships have been affected by his passing visits? Is the specific romantic chaos of the town, from Mabel's parade of summer crushes to Wendy's romantic complications, somehow amplified by his presence? Mystery number 167. The Infinity-Sided Die. Ford mentions encountering a highly illegal infinity-sided die during his dimensional wanderings. A die with infinite sides could theoretically produce infinite possible outcomes, which, in a show that takes physics seriously, would make it a device of enormous and uncontrollable consequence. The mere existence of such an object in the same multiverse that contains Bill Cipher and the Nightmare Realm raises questions about what rules of probability and causality exist in this universe. And who decided that an infinity-sided die was illegal rather than simply impossible? Mystery number 168. The Arachnomorphs in the larger context of supernatural camouflage. The Arachnomorphs are spider people who disguise themselves as human to lure victims at roadside attractions across Oregon. Their existence suggests a broader predator ecology in this universe that involves taking on human form as a hunting strategy. This in turn implies that the supernatural world is far more integrated with ordinary human experience than Gravity Falls' status as a supernatural hotspot would suggest. If spider people are operating roadside attractions in Oregon, what else is operating in ordinary human spaces? What are the limits of the supernatural masquerade? Mystery number 169. McGucket's invention of personalized computing and what it means for the show's universe. McGucket was apparently pioneering personalized computer technology in the 1970s, which in our real world was not commercially viable until the mid-1980s. In the show's universe, his work was apparently significant enough for Ford to cite it. If McGucket's computing work was as advanced as Ford suggests, and if he subsequently abandoned that work after his mental collapse, the show's universe may have developed computer technology along a different path than our world did. The baseline technology of the show's world is never explicitly stated, but the presence of a genius computing pioneer who then spent 30 years institutionalized and technologically disconnected from society could mean a significant technological fork in the road. Mystery number 170. What is the actual population of Gravity Falls, and does it know itself? The show gives the town a population of approximately 8,000, a small but not tiny community. The Society of the Blind Eye erased supernatural memories from apparently hundreds of residents over decades. By the show's events, the collective memory of the town has been systematically stripped of a significant portion of authentic experience. The people of Gravity Falls have been living in a town that does things to them and then takes back the memory of being done to. They have been experiencing cognitive theft as a community service. When the society is disbanded and the memory erasure stops, the town's residents have to begin accumulating unaltered memories of supernatural events. That process of a community gradually waking up to the full reality of where it lives is one of the most interesting, unexplored stories the show creates. Mystery number 171. The specific relationship between Bill Cipher and the Bill Cipher Zodiac design. The Zodiac appears in Bill's imagery constantly. It is literally his wheel, his symbol, his signature on everything he has touched. But the Zodiac is also, specifically, the mechanism for his defeat. The prophecy that could destroy him is named after him, depicted as surrounding him. This is either the supreme irony of a universe that embeds the solution to a problem in the problem itself, or it is something Bill understands and has designed. If Bill knows about the Zodiac and its power to defeat him, why does he allow its imagery to persist? Why not destroy every representation of it? Unless the Zodiac's power requires willing ignorance from him to function. And his knowledge of it and dismissal of it is itself the vulnerability. Mystery number 172. The specific sound Bill makes when he dies. Or appears to die, the final moment of Bill's apparent destruction, as the memory gun fires and he shatters, is accompanied by a specific reversed audio sequence. The backwards message, when isolated and reversed, is not just AXOLOTL, my time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. It is more complex. There are sounds underneath the primary message, layered backwards audio that fans have analyzed at length without achieving consensus. Some hear additional words. Some hear nothing but production echo. The ambiguity of what is in those final sounds is fully intentional. Alex Hirsch put something in there that is specifically designed to be uncertain. Mystery number 173. The final image of the show before the credits. The very last frame of the final episode, after all the emotional resolution and the goodbyes and the warm ending, shows a Polaroid photograph. It is placed specifically, held in a specific frame, and what it contains has been analyzed extensively. The Polaroid tradition in the show's opening theme, which shows Polaroids falling from above in a moment of foreshadowing, makes every Polaroid in the show potentially significant. The final one is not an accident. Mystery number 174. What Alex Hirsch has not said. In the decade since Gravity Falls ended, Hirsch has given dozens of interviews. He has revealed canonical information. He has declined to answer specific questions with a consistency that suggests the questions have answers he knows. The pattern of what he chooses not to address, the specific mysteries he sidesteps rather than deflects, is itself a kind of map. The things Alex Hirsch will not talk about are the things he is keeping for the story he has not yet found a way to tell. A video game, a continuation, something in a format that can do justice to what he has left in the margins. The project does not exist yet, but the information it would contain is apparently already known by at least one person. Mystery number 175. What are you looking for when you come back to Gravity Falls? This one is for you. Not for the wiki or the fan theories or the cryptogram databases. This one is the question you carry when you rewatch the opening theme and feel something tighten in your chest that you cannot quite name. The question you are holding when you sit with something warm in the dark and let a story about a 12-year-old boy with a birthmark shaped like a star map convince you, for the duration of its running time, that curiosity is worth it. That the unknown is not only frightening, but also beautiful. That some mysteries should stay mysteries not because the answers do not exist, but because the living inside the question is part of what makes us who we are. There is a particular quality to the things we love when we are very young that does not quite exist in anything we discover later. The things that find us when we are still open to being found, that show up in the exact right summer when we are exactly the right amount of curious and exactly the right amount of afraid, those things mark us. They become part of the architecture of who we are. Gravity Falls is that for a very specific generation of people who watched it when they were 12 or 14 or 35 and staying up too late with the lights off. And in every case, it found them at exactly the right moment for something about its particular combination of warmth and mystery and carefully placed grief to land exactly where they needed it to. What you are looking for when you come back is not the answers. You have those, or as many as exist. What you are looking for is the version of you that first found the show, sitting in the specific geography of that earlier moment, open to being surprised, open to being scared, open to caring about a family of complicated liars in a weird little Oregon town more than you expected to care about anything on a Thursday evening. That version of you is still in there somewhere. Gravity Falls is very good at calling them back out. Alex Hirsch built a show that ended, and then he built a world that did not. Somewhere in a small town in Oregon, north of normal and west of weird, summer is still going. The pine trees are too close together. The shadows move when nothing casts them. The journals are hidden and waiting, and somewhere between the pages, in the invisible ink and the coded marginalia, and the deliberate question marks, a six-fingered scientist is still writing down what he found, still filling in the blanks, still asking why, still finding things, still wondering, still here. On a rug in a tourist trap that is also a laboratory that is also a 30-year rescue mission that is also a home, there's a triangle with one eye that has been waiting a very long time. But tonight, it is quiet. Tonight, all the mysteries are still safe in their boxes, waiting for the right person to open them. That might be you. If you made it this far tonight, I want you to know that you are exactly the kind of person this community was made for. The curious ones. The ones who cannot stop pulling at threads even when it is late, and the house is quiet and there is absolutely no practical reason to still be awake thinking about a cartoon. The ones who hear Stan is not what he seems at the beginning of every episode for 2 years, and one day decide to decode it. Not because they needed to, but because the possibility that there was something hidden there was enough. You are my people. If you love this video, please like it so that more people like you can find it. Subscribe to Uncle Guy Lore so you never miss a night like this one, where we go deep into the lore of the things we love and stay as long as the mysteries hold. Leave a comment with your favorite unsolved Gravity Falls mystery, the one that keeps you up at night, the one you are still not sure about. I read every single one. And for those of you just discovering Uncle Guy Lore, welcome. We do this every time. We go somewhere dark and quiet and we look at the things that are hidden there until they start to look back. This is a good place to be. Gravity Falls is a show that asks something of you. It asks you to pay attention, to decode, to care, to sit with questions that do not resolve. It is a show built around the conviction that the most important things in life, love, family, truth, wonder, are worth the effort of pursuit, even when the pursuit is difficult and the destination is uncertain. It is a show that ends with summer ending, which is also the most honest thing you can say about childhood. It goes. The specific version of yourself that existed in those summers that ran through the woods and pulled at threads and believed absolutely in the importance of the mystery, that version does not persist. But something does. Something carries forward the way a birthmark does, the way a memory stored in a glass tube waits in the dark until someone finds it and holds it up to the light. Alex Hirsch was 27 years old when Gravity Falls first aired. He was making something about growing up, about twins who would eventually have to become different people in different places, about a summer that was always going to end and was made more beautiful by that knowledge rather than less. He was making something about fathers and brothers and the people who shaped you without meaning to, about the secrets that families keep and the love that persists under and through and despite all of them. He hid 618 in every corner of it. His birthday, the day he arrived, a signature in every episode saying, "I was here. I made this. This came from somewhere real." It still does. Gravity Falls is a show that rewards you for being the kind of person who stays, who pays attention, who shows up again and again for something that gives back more the more you bring to it. That is a rare thing. Treasure it. The truth is out there. It always was. See you next time.